after spending $22,000 to organize the event. My fiancé said, "Your proposal wasn't good enough. You need you to do it again." In front of her friends. I said, "You deserve better." So I hired a billboard company. What she read driving to work the next morning wasn't another proposal. Look, I'm not saying I'm an idiot, but I did drop $22,000 on a marriage proposal, so you can draw your own conclusions here. 22 grand. That's a decent used car. That's a semester of college if you're shopping smart. That's roughly 800 Chipotle burritos with guac. And honestly, the burritos probably would have brought me more long-term happiness, but hindsight's a real pain in the ass like that. The proposal itself? Oh, it was perfect. I'm talking luxury rooftop garden with a view that made the city look like God himself had placed each building there for our romantic convenience. I hired a string quartet. Not just any string quartet, but the kind that usually plays at weddings where the bride's father owns a yacht with a smaller yacht attached to it. Custom lighting that made the whole scene glow, like we were floating in some kind of Instagram filter come to life. And here's where I really went off the rails with the whole thing. I had her favorite perfume, this ridiculously expensive Chanel number that costs more per ounce than premium gasoline, misted through the air like we were shooting a commercial for engagement rings or luxury sedans, or whatever rich people buy when they're feeling emotional. Everything was choreographed down to the second. The skyline sparkled on cue like it had gotten the memo about my big moment. Champagne flowed. The good stuff too. None of that Andre nonsense you bring to a college party. When I dropped down on one knee, and I mean really committed to the kneel with both hands on that little velvet box, random strangers on nearby rooftops actually started clapping. Clapping. Like we were the feel-good finale of some romantic comedy where the quirky guy finally gets the girl and everyone learns a valuable lesson about love. The photographer I'd hired for an ungodly sum captured every single moment, every tear rolling down my cheek, every sparkle of that ring that cost more than my first car. She said yes. Of course she said yes. How could she not with all that production value surrounding us? I cried actual tears of joy, the kind you can't fake even if you're trying. My voice cracked when I told her I loved her, and I meant every syllable. The photographer's camera clicked away like it was documenting the moon landing. For one perfect moment, suspended there above the city with champagne bubbles floating around us and a string quartet playing something classical and moving, I genuinely believed I'd nailed it. I'd created the perfect moment. I was the boyfriend, no, fiancé, of the year. For exactly 1 week, we were a social media fairy tale. Her Instagram post about the proposal got more likes than anything she'd ever posted, including that time she accidentally went semi-viral for a photo with her dog wearing sunglasses. Comments rolled in like a tidal wave of heart emojis and, "OMG you guys, and this is what true love looks like." Her friends shared it. Her mom shared it. Random people I went to high school with who I'm pretty sure blocked me years ago suddenly wanted to congratulate us. I was riding high, feeling like I'd accomplished something genuinely special, like I'd leveled up in the game of life and unlocked some achievement that came with a sense of purpose and those little notifications that make your brain release happy chemicals. Then came the dinner with her friends. The same crew of women who genuinely believe that brunch is a personality trait and that having strong opinions about bottomless mimosas counts as having a worldview. We met at some trendy place downtown where the menu doesn't list prices because if you have to ask, you probably shouldn't be eating there. The kind of restaurant where they describe every dish like it's a poem and the waiter introduces himself like you're about to become lifelong friends. That's when everything started sliding sideways. One of her friends, let's call her Brittany because every friend group has a Brittany and she's always causing problems, bragged about how her boyfriend proposed to her in a helicopter hovering over the Hollywood sign. A helicopter. Because apparently, ground-based proposals are for peasants and people who have reasonable financial boundaries. Another friend, who I'm pretty sure works in marketing and never lets anyone forget it, mentioned how her man proposed during a Beyoncé concert, somehow getting Beyoncé herself to acknowledge them on the Jumbotron. At a Beyoncé concert. I didn't even know that was possible without having connections to the Illuminati or whatever secret society runs celebrity events. My fiancé. Let's call her Sierra because that's the kind of name that fits someone who would do what she's about to do, smiled politely through all these stories. She nodded in all the right places, made the appropriate sounds, sipped her overpriced wine like she was judging its quality for a lifestyle blog. I should have seen it coming. I should have noticed the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes, or how she kept glancing at me with this look I couldn't quite read, but probably should have interpreted as warning, incoming disaster. Then, right there between the appetizers and the main course, right when I was starting to relax and think maybe we'd escaped the comparison trap, Sierra put down her wine glass, looked at me with those eyes that I'd spent $22,000 trying to impress, and stabbed my ego with the precision of a steak knife hitting a ribeye. "Honestly," she said, and let me tell you, nothing good ever follows the word honestly when it's said in that particular tone. "Your proposal wasn't that special. I mean, it was nice and everything, but I think you should redo it properly." The table went quiet for exactly half a second, just long enough for the words to land and detonate, before everyone started laughing. Not uncomfortable laughing, not nervous laughing, but genuine amusement like she'd just made the cutest joke in the world. Like asking your fiancé to repropose because the first $22,000 attempt wasn't Instagram-worthy enough was somehow adorable and quirky instead of completely unhinged. I just smiled. That's what you do in moments like that, right? You smile because you're in public and making a scene would be worse than sitting there taking the hit. You smile because her friends are watching and you don't want to be the guy who can't take a joke. You smile because some deeply ingrained part of your brain still thinks maybe you can smooth this over. Maybe you misunderstood. Maybe she didn't just publicly announce that your grand romantic gesture was basically a participation trophy. But inside, something cracked. Not like a plate dropping and shattering into obvious pieces that everyone can see. More like a windshield getting hit by a rock on the highway. One small point of impact that spiderwebs out into 1,000 tiny fractures you don't notice until the sun hits it wrong, and suddenly you realize the whole thing is compromised and probably needs to be replaced before it becomes a safety hazard. I sat there with my smile plastered on, nodding along as the conversation moved to other topics, and all I could think about was that receipt. That $22,000 receipt sitting in my email inbox. A digital reminder that I'd just spent the equivalent of a decent used car on a moment that my fiancé had just rated somewhere between meh and please try again. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of overpriced entrees and fake laughter. I said the right things at the right times, laughed when everyone else laughed, played the part of the good boyfriend, sorry, fiancé, who could roll with the punches. But that crack inside kept spreading, each new fracture adding to the web of realization that maybe, just maybe, I'd made a terrible mistake. And I'm not talking about the proposal. The ride home from that dinner was quieter than a library during finals week, and about twice as tense. Sierra scrolled through her phone in the passenger seat, probably texting her friends about how hilarious her little roast session had been, while I gripped the steering wheel and tried to figure out if car insurance covers vehicular homicide committed during a moment of extreme emotional distress. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. And also, I'm not actually a murderer. I just play one in my increasingly dark internal monologue. We got back to our apartment. Well, technically my apartment that she'd basically moved into over the past year, filling it with throw pillows that served no functional purpose and scented candles that all somehow smelled exactly the same despite having names like Tuscan Sunrise and Midnight Jasmine. She kicked off her heels, the expensive ones she'd bought specifically for Instagram photos, and headed straight for the kitchen to make herself some detox tea. Because of course she drinks detox tea. Of course. I stood there in the living room, still wearing my jacket, watching her move around my kitchen like she owned the place, and tried to process what had just happened. $22,000. A string quartet. Champagne that cost more per bottle than most people spend on their monthly cell phone bill. Custom lighting. Perfume misted through the freaking air like we were in a Chanel commercial directed by someone who really wanted that Oscar. And her verdict was not that special. Sierra settled onto the couch with her tea, the steam rising up and probably cleansing her aura or aligning her chakras, or whatever pseudo-spiritual nonsense detox tea is supposed to do besides make you pee a lot. She patted the cushion next to her, inviting me to sit down like we were about to have a totally normal conversation about our totally normal evening, where she definitely hadn't just publicly humiliated me in front of her entire friend group. So, she said, blowing on her tea with this casual energy that suggested she had absolutely zero awareness of the nuclear bomb she'd dropped at dinner. I've been thinking about the proposal redo. Oh, she'd been thinking about it. How wonderful. How absolutely delightful that she'd been using her brain cells to plan the sequel to my financial suicide. You can just hire professionals next time, she continued, like she was suggesting I hire someone to mow the lawn instead of asking me to orchestrate another multi-thousand-dollar spectacle. There are companies that specialize in this stuff. Like, they plan the whole thing, make it go viral, get it on the news. Some of them even have connections with celebrities who can make cameos. I stared at her, just straight up stared, trying to figure out if she was pranking me, if maybe this was some elaborate test of my patience or my commitment or my ability to withstand psychological torture. She sipped her detox tea like she wasn't currently detoxing from common sense, her face completely serene, waiting for my response. The credit card receipt flashed through my mind again. $22,000. I'd been eating ramen for 2 months leading up to that proposal, saving every penny, skipping lunches, turning down nights out with friends because I was determined to make that moment perfect. I'd called in favors, researched the best vendors, spent hours planning every single detail down to the exact shade of lighting that would make the ring sparkle most impressively. And now she wanted me to do it again, except bigger, better, more expensive, with professional viral moment coordinators and maybe a Kardashian cameo if I could swing it. Something inside me clicked. Not the crack from dinner. That was still there, spreading like the roots of a tree under pavement, but something else. Something colder and clearer and significantly more pissed off. You're right, I said, keeping my voice perfectly calm, almost monotone. You deserve better. Her face lit up like I'd just told her she won the lottery. Exactly. She set down her tea and grabbed my hand, squeezing it with genuine enthusiasm. I knew you'd understand. And honestly, babe, it's not even about the money. It's about the experience, you know? The story we'll tell our kids someday. Oh, Dad proposed twice because the first time wasn't good enough. That's romantic. That's romantic. The woman just described me spending potentially another 22 grand as a cute anecdote for hypothetical future children, and she thought that was romantic. I wondered briefly if you could develop a brain aneurysm from sheer disbelief, because I was pretty sure I felt something pop in my skull. Yeah, I said, pulling my hand back under the pretense of needing to take off my jacket. Super romantic. She didn't catch the sarcasm. Of course she didn't. Sierra had the sarcasm detection capabilities of a golden retriever, sweet, enthusiastic, and completely oblivious to subtext. I'm so glad we're on the same page, she said, picking up her phone and starting to type rapidly with her thumbs. I'm going to send you some links. There are these Pinterest boards I've been following, epic proposal redos that go viral. And some of them are just incredible. Like, there's this one where the guy rented out an entire theme park, and another where they did it during a flash mob in Times Square with professional dancers. She kept talking, rattling off increasingly absurd proposal scenarios like she was ordering from a menu, but I'd stopped listening. My brain had shifted into a different gear entirely, one that was less focused on romance and more focused on revenge. No, not revenge. That sounded too dramatic, too villain origin story. Let's call it justice. Or maybe petty justice. Petty justice with a side of public humiliation and a garnish of social media warfare. You deserve better, I'd said. And I'd meant it. She absolutely deserved better than me. Better as in someone else entirely. Someone who wasn't me. Someone who could find her endearing instead of enraging. Someone who wouldn't spend the rest of the night lying awake in bed plotting her downfall while she snored peacefully next to him, probably dreaming about helicopter proposals and celebrity cameos. That night, after she'd finally exhausted herself talking about viral proposals and fallen asleep, I lay there staring at the ceiling, my phone clutched in my hand. She'd sent me approximately 17 Pinterest links before bed, each one titled something like Proposals That Broke the Internet, or When He Finally Got It Right the Second Time. I scrolled through them in the darkness, each swipe making me more certain of what I needed to do. If she wanted a spectacle, I'd give her a spectacle. If she wanted something unforgettable, something that would make headlines and trend on social media, something that people would talk about for months afterward, I'd deliver exactly that. Just maybe not in the way she was expecting. Around 3 in the morning, I started making a list in my notes app. Not a list of romantic venues or professional proposal planners, but something entirely different. Something that would require careful planning, strategic execution, and a level of pettiness that would make the ancient Greeks who invented drama look like amateurs. Sierra shifted in her sleep, mumbling something incoherent about Instagram followers, and I felt absolutely nothing. Not love, not affection, not even residual attraction. Just cold, crystalline clarity about what needed to happen next. By dawn, I hadn't slept at all, but I had a plan. A beautiful, terrible, absolutely brilliant plan that would either make me a legend or get me killed. Possibly both. I saved the notes, cleared the Pinterest links from my notifications so I wouldn't have to look at them again, and waited for morning. When Sierra woke up a few hours later, stretching and yawning and immediately reaching for her phone to check whatever social media drama had unfolded overnight, I was already up, showered, and making coffee. I even made her some, exactly the way she liked it. Oat milk, 1 pump of vanilla syrup, the works. "Morning, babe," she said, accepting the coffee with a sleepy smile. "Did you look at those links I sent?" I smiled back at her, the same smile I'd given at dinner when she'd stabbed my ego in front of her friends. "Oh yeah," I said. "I've got some ideas. This next proposal is going to be unforgettable." She squealed, actually squealed like a teenager meeting a boy band, and kissed my cheek. "I'm so excited. When are you thinking?" "Soon," I told her, taking a sip of my coffee and savoring the bitter taste. "Very soon. I just need to make a few calls first." She bounced off to take a shower, completely oblivious to the fact that she'd just signed her own social death warrant. And me? I picked up my phone and started dialing. The next morning, fueled by spite and approximately 4 cups of coffee that were doing absolutely nothing for my sleep deprivation, but everything for my commitment to chaos, I made 3 phone calls that would change the entire trajectory of my life. Well, technically 4 if you count the one to my therapist to cancel my appointment, because I was about to do something that would either cure me or give me enough material for the next 10 years of sessions. First call, Ray, my lawyer friend. And yes, before you ask, having a lawyer friend is one of those adult things you don't realize you need until you're planning to publicly humiliate your fiancé via billboard advertising and want to make sure you won't end up in actual prison for it. Ray answered on the 3rd ring, sounding groggy because apparently not everyone wakes up at the crack of dawn to plot elaborate revenge schemes. "This better be good," he mumbled. "I was dreaming about winning a case." "I need to ask you some hypothetical questions about gifts and rings," I said, pacing around my living room while Sierra sang off-key in the shower, probably practicing for her imaginary viral proposal moment. There was a pause. "Hypothetical. Very hypothetical. You're about to do something stupid, aren't you?" "That depends entirely on your definition of stupid and also whether it's technically legal." Ray sighed the sigh of a man who'd been friends with me long enough to know that this conversation was going to cost him at least an hour of his morning and possibly his faith in humanity. "Hit me with it." I laid out the situation. The $22,000 proposal, the public humiliation at dinner, Sierra's demand for a redo, and my growing suspicion that I'd accidentally gotten engaged to someone whose empathy levels rivaled those of a parking meter. Ray listened without interrupting, which is lawyer speak for, "Oh boy, this is even worse than I thought." "So hypothetically," I said, reaching the actual point, "if someone were to return an engagement ring, would it legally still be considered a gift, or could the giver reclaim it and, say, donate it somewhere?" "Hypothetically," Ray said, and I could hear him switching into lawyer mode. "In most states, an engagement ring is considered a conditional gift. If the engagement ends, the ring typically goes back to the person who proposed. If she's the one who broke it off, or if you mutually agree to end it, you'd have grounds to take the ring back. And if I wanted to, hypothetically, make it very public that I was taking said ring back. As long as you're not lying or deliberately damaging her reputation with false information, you're generally in the clear. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation." He paused. "What exactly are you planning?" "Nothing that will require your services," I said, which was probably a lie but sounded reassuring. "Thanks, man. I owe you one." "You owe me several. But who's counting?" Ray said. "And hey, don't do anything I wouldn't do." "Ray, you once sued a guy for looking at you wrong in a Starbucks." "He was looking at me very wrong. There's precedent." I hung up and immediately dialed number 2. "Leo, my jeweler." Leo's one of those guys who treats diamonds like they're his children and has strong opinions about clarity grades that border on religious fervor. He'd sold me the engagement ring, a family heirloom from my grandmother that he'd reset in a modern design because Sierra said vintage rings were kind of dusty vibes. My friend, Leo answered, because jewelers are always weirdly enthusiastic even at 8 in the morning. How is married life treating you? Wait, you're not married yet. How is engaged life? About that, I said. She wants me to return the ring. The line went so quiet I thought the call had dropped. Then, I'm sorry, what? She said the proposal wasn't good enough. She wants me to redo it. With a different ring. A bigger one, apparently. Leo made it sound like someone had just told him Santa wasn't real and also had personally burned down his workshop. That was your grandmother's diamond. I reset that stone myself. The clarity, the cut, that ring was perfect. I know, Leo. And she wants you to return it. Well, she wants me to upgrade. But yeah, essentially. I could practically hear Leo's blood pressure rising through the phone. The man took his work personally, which I respected, but was also currently using to my advantage. What are you going to do? He asked, his voice tight. I'm going to take your advice from when I first bought it, I said. You told me if she didn't appreciate it, she didn't deserve it. I did say that, Leo said slowly. What are you planning? Something your grandmother would approve of? I said. Something charitable. Can I bring the ring by later? Absolutely. And you know what? I'm not even charging you the restocking fee. This one's on the house. That woman is Meshuggah. 2 calls down, 1 to go. I saved Nina for last because her reaction would either greenlight my entire plan or convince me I'd officially lost my mind and should probably seek professional help instead of professional billboard space. Nina worked for Premier Outdoor Advertising, one of those companies that owns approximately 800 billboards scattered across the city like commercial confetti. I'd gotten her number through a work connection, and we'd chatted a few times at networking events where I'd learned 2 important things about her. She had access to prime billboard real estate, and she had a sense of humor darker than my coffee. Nina speaking. She answered, professional and crisp. Nina, it's Ethan. We met at the marketing conference last year. You told me if I ever needed billboard space for something interesting, I should call you. I remember, she said, and I could hear the curiosity creeping into her voice. Please tell me you're not selling used cars or advertising a strip club. Better, I said. I need 3 billboards along a specific route. Prime visibility, high traffic, weekend placement. 3 billboards? That's going to run you. Money's not an issue, I interrupted, which was absolutely a lie because I just dropped 22 grand on a failed proposal. But credit cards exist for a reason, and that reason is apparently public revenge. I need them this Sunday. Morning commute. Nina was quiet for a moment. What are you advertising? A breakup. Another pause. I'm listening. I laid out the whole story. The proposal, the dinner, Sierra's demand for a redo, and my plan to give her exactly what she wanted. Something viral, something unforgettable, something that would absolutely make headlines. Just not in the way she was hoping. By the time I finished, Nina was laughing so hard I thought she might need medical attention. You're either a genius or you're going to be single by Monday, she gasped between giggles. Both are fine, I said, and I meant it. Okay, Nina said, trying to compose herself. Send me the route you want, and let's talk about the messaging. We need to be careful about wording. Nothing outright cruel, nothing that could be considered harassment, but enough to make the point crystal clear. I'm thinking 3 billboards, escalating in intensity, I said, pulling up the notes I'd made at 3 in the morning. The first one sets the scene, the second one provides context, and the third one is the knockout punch, Nina finished. I like it. Send me your mock-ups and I'll get the design team on it. This is either the best or worst decision you've ever made, and honestly, I'm excited to find out which. We hammered out the details, locations, fonts, color schemes, the works. Nina suggested we add a 4th billboard, something I hadn't considered, and when she told me her idea, I nearly dropped my phone. That's brilliant, I said. That's absolutely brilliant. I know, Nina said, and I could hear her grinning. That's why they pay me the big bucks. Well, moderate bucks. Okay, slightly above minimum wage, but still. By the time I hung up, Sierra had emerged from the shower, wrapped in a towel, and scrolling through her phone. Who were you talking to? She asked absently. Just making some arrangements, I said, smiling at her with all the warmth of a snake eyeing a particularly plump mouse. For the proposal redo. Her face lit up like Times Square on New Year's Eve. Really? Oh my God, when? What are you planning? Can I get a hint? It's going to be big, I told her, which was technically true. Bigger than anything you've seen before. Very public. Very memorable. The kind of thing people will be talking about for months. She squealed and threw her arms around me, still damp from the shower, her towel threatening to abandon its post entirely. You're the best. I knew you'd come through. Should I get my hair done? What should I wear? Should I warn my friends to be ready? Definitely warn your friends, I said. And maybe your family too. You'll want everyone to see this. She bounced away to start planning her outfit for what she thought would be Proposal 2.0, The Reckoning, while I pulled up the design mock-ups Nina had just sent me. Billboard number 1. Sierra thinks $22,000 isn't enough for love. Billboard number 2. Return the ring. Demanded a redo. Stay tuned for season 2 of The Proposal. Billboard number 3. Screenshots of her actual texts where she told her friends I was sweet but too basic, and that she deserved something viral. And Nina's brilliant addition, Billboard number 4. Ethan is now single and accepting applications. No proposal required. Below it, in smaller text, Grandma's ring donated to Children's Hospital because real love helps, not humiliates. I stared at my phone, at these 4 digital rectangles that would soon be plastered across the city in 20-foot-tall glory, and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Genuine, unfiltered joy. Sierra called from the bedroom, asking if she should get her nails done in white or champagne pink for the big day. Surprise me. I called back, saving the mock-ups and forwarding them to Nina with a simple message. Let's do this. Sunday couldn't come fast enough. The next few days were a masterclass in psychological torture. Mine, not hers, unfortunately. Sierra spent the time between Wednesday and Sunday in a state of euphoric anticipation that would have been adorable if it wasn't making me want to walk into traffic. She buzzed around the apartment like a hummingbird on espresso, planning her outfit, coordinating with her friends, and generally treating the upcoming Sunday like it was her personal Super Bowl, Met Gala, and coronation all rolled into one Instagram-perfect package. You're planning something, aren't you? She asked Thursday night, twirling a strand of hair around her finger in that way girls do in movies when they're trying to be cute and mysterious. We were sitting on the couch, some reality show playing in the background where people screamed at each other about things that definitely didn't matter, which felt like perfect thematic accompaniment to my current life situation. I looked up from my phone, where I'd been reviewing the final Billboard proofs for approximately the 800th time, making sure every word was perfect, every screenshot crystal clear. Something unforgettable, I said, which was both completely true and deeply misleading, my favorite kind of statement. Her eyes went wide with excitement. I knew it. I can always tell when you're scheming. She leaned closer, trying to peek at my phone screen, but I tilted it away under the pretense of the glare bothering my eyes. Give me a hint. Just one tiny hint. It involves your commute to work, I said, which again, technically accurate while being wonderfully vague. She gasped like I'd just revealed the location of buried treasure. Are you doing something on my way to work? Oh my God. Are you going to surprise me during my drive? That's so romantic. Wait, should I leave earlier? Should I do my makeup differently? What if I'm not ready? Just take your normal route, I assured her, fighting back a smile that probably looked more manic than reassuring. Trust me, you won't miss it. Friday morning, she called her mom. I know this because I could hear her squealing from the bedroom while I made coffee and contemplated whether I was a genius or just someone who was going to need to change their identity and move to a different state by Monday. The conversation went exactly as you'd expect. Lots of, I know, right? And he's finally stepping up. And this time it's going to be perfect. Her mom, God bless her, seemed cautiously supportive in that way mothers are when they secretly think their daughter is being ridiculous but don't want to start World War III over brunch. I'd always liked Sierra's mom. She made excellent pot roast, and had once told me very quietly at Thanksgiving that her daughter could be a bit much sometimes. I wondered how she'd react to the billboards. Probably better than Sierra would, honestly. By Friday afternoon, Sierra had told her friends, her coworkers, her nail technician, the barista at her favorite coffee shop, and probably several random strangers on the street. She posted a cryptic Instagram story, Just a photo of a calendar with Sunday circled in heart emojis and the caption, "Something amazing is happening, ring sparkles," which got approximately 400 responses asking what was going on. She responded to exactly 0 of them, preferring to keep everyone in suspense like she was announcing a pregnancy or a movie sequel instead of what she thought would be her second engagement to the same guy. Her friend group chat was blowing up constantly. I know because she kept reading the messages out loud, completely oblivious to how each one made me want to throw myself off our apartment balcony. Brittany says she hopes you rented a helicopter this time, Sierra announced Friday night, scrolling through her phone while eating takeout Thai food. And Madison wants to know if you're going to propose somewhere Instagrammable because she wants to post about it. It'll be very visible, I said, stabbing my pad thai with probably more aggression than the noodles deserved. Maximum visibility, actually. Perfect, she said, missing the point entirely while doing that thing where she took a photo of her food from 17 different angles before actually eating it. Saturday was the worst. Not because anything particularly dramatic happened, but because Sierra spent the entire day in preparation mode like she was getting ready for the Oscars. She went to get her hair done, some complicated process involving highlights and lowlights, and something called glossing that apparently costs as much as a car payment. Then came the manicure, the pedicure, the eyebrow threading, the eyelash appointment, and approximately 4 hours at the mall looking for the perfect outfit for a proposal. She FaceTimed me from a dressing room, holding up 2 different dresses. The white one says, "innocent and surprised," but the red one says, "I knew this was coming and I look amazing." Which one? Red, I said, because why not? Let her look amazing when her world comes crashing down. At least the photos would be aesthetically pleasing. That's what I was thinking. She blew me a kiss through the screen. "You're the best, babe. I can't wait for tomorrow." "Me neither," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my petty, vindictive soul. She came home around 6 with approximately 17 shopping bags and the energy of someone who'd just mainlined a case of Red Bull. For the next 3 hours, she tried on various combinations of outfits, asking my opinion on each one like I was a panel judge on America's Next Top Model instead of someone who was actively planning her social execution. "What about this?" she'd ask, spinning in a dress that probably cost more than the billboards. "Great," I'd say. "Or this." "Also great." "You're not even looking." "They're all great, Sierra. You look beautiful in everything." Which was true. She was objectively attractive, which honestly made this whole situation more frustrating because it meant I couldn't even fall back on the well. At least I dodged a bullet, reasoning when the bullet was a 5'6" former homecoming queen with perfect teeth and the personality of a particularly demanding house cat. Saturday night, we ordered pizza and watched a movie, though I couldn't tell you what it was about because I spent the entire time mentally rehearsing tomorrow's timeline. Nina had sent me the installation schedule. The billboards would go up at 6 a.m., right in time for early morning traffic. Sierra typically left for work around 8:15, which meant she'd hit the first billboard around 8:25, the second around 8:35, and the third around 8:45 if traffic was normal. The fourth one, the grand finale, was positioned right near her office building. She'd see it when she pulled into the parking garage. Perfect. Chef's kiss. No notes. "What are you thinking about?" Sierra asked, cuddling up next to me on the couch, her head on my shoulder in a gesture of affection that might have meant something a week ago, but now just felt like dead weight. "Tomorrow," I said honestly. "Me too," she sighed contentedly. "I've been thinking about what I'll say when you propose. Like, should I act surprised even though I know it's coming? Or should I just be genuine and excited?" "Be genuine," I suggested. "Definitely be genuine. I want your real, unfiltered reaction." "You're so sweet," she said, squeezing my arm. "This is going to be perfect. I can feel it." I smiled in the darkness of the living room, the TV casting flickering shadows across the walls. "Yeah," I agreed. "It's definitely going to be something." Around 11, she finally went to bed, but not before spending another 45 minutes on her phone, presumably texting everyone she'd ever met about tomorrow's big event. I stayed up, sitting on the couch with my own phone, staring at the final confirmation email from Nina. "All systems go," it read. "Billboards will be live at 6 a.m. Godspeed, you magnificent bastard." I sent back a simple thumbs up emoji and allowed myself a moment of doubt. Was I really doing this? Was I actually going to publicly humiliate my fiancée via billboard advertising because she'd been tactless and materialistic about a proposal I'd spent $22,000 planning? Then I remembered her face at that dinner, the way she'd smiled while stabbing my ego in front of her friends. The way she'd laugh like it was all just a cute joke instead of a genuinely hurtful dismissal of something I'd put my whole heart into. The way she'd spent the last week treating me like a trained monkey who just needed to perform the right tricks to earn her approval. Yeah, I was really doing this. I set my alarm for 5:45 a.m., early enough to be awake when the billboards went live, late enough that Sierra wouldn't question why I was up so early on a Sunday. Then I went to bed, lying next to my soon-to-be ex-fiancée, listening to her peaceful breathing, and felt absolutely nothing except anticipation. Sunday morning was going to be legendary. The alarm went off at 5:45, and I silenced it quickly, not wanting to wake Sierra before her big moment. I slipped out of bed, grabbed my phone, and headed to the living room. At exactly 6:02 a.m., Nina sent a photo. All 4 billboards, lit up and glorious, towering over the city like monuments to my pettiness. They were beautiful, absolutely beautiful. I made coffee and waited. Sierra's alarm would go off at 7:30. She'd spend 45 minutes getting ready, obsessing over every detail. Then she'd leave, completely unaware that her entire life was about to become a meme. At 7:30, I heard her alarm, then the shower, then the hairdryer, then the endless shuffle of her going through her closet one more time, even though she'd planned this outfit yesterday. At 8:10, she emerged, looking absolutely stunning in the red dress, her hair and makeup flawless, her smile bright enough to power a small city. "How do I look?" she asked, doing a little spin. "Like you're about to have the most memorable day of your life," I said. She beamed. "I'll text you when it happens, okay? And then you have to act surprised when I tell you about it later." "Oh, I don't think I'll need to act surprised," I said. "Trust me." She kissed my cheek, grabbed her purse, and headed for the door. Right before she left, she turned back one more time. "I love you," she said. I smiled. "Have a great drive to work." The door closed behind her, and I checked my watch. 8:13 a.m. In exactly 12 minutes, Sierra's life was going to implode, and I was going to be here, drinking coffee and watching it all unfold via the traffic cameras Nina had so helpfully given me access to. Let the games begin. At exactly 8:05 a.m., my phone rang. Not a casual text, not a gentle buzz, a full volume, ringtone blaring, someone is either dying or furious phone call. Sierra's name flashed across the screen along with that photo of us from our third date. Back when I thought she was quirky and charming instead of materialistic and soul-crushing. I let it ring twice before answering, taking a leisurely sip of my coffee first, because timing is everything in comedy and apparently also in revenge. "Hello," I said, going for innocent confusion, like I couldn't possibly imagine why she'd be calling me 12 minutes into her commute. "Are you insane?" Her voice came through so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. In the background, I could hear car horns, a lot of car horns, and what sounded like someone yelling something about traffic. I put her on speaker and settled back into the couch, getting comfortable for what I knew was going to be the greatest phone call of my entire life. "Good morning to you too, sunshine," I said cheerfully. "How's the drive going?" Are you kidding me right now?" She was hyperventilating between words, her voice reaching frequencies that probably had dogs howling 3 states over. "The billboard. There's a billboard. With my name on it." "Oh," I said, channeling every ounce of fake surprise I could muster. "What does it say?" "Sierra thinks $22,000 isn't enough for love," she shrieked, and I could hear the capital letters in her voice. "It's huge. It's on the highway. Everyone can see it." I took another sip of coffee, savoring both the dark roast and the darker satisfaction of a plan coming together. "Huh, that's weird. Must be a different Sierra. IT has a photo of me." More car horns. Someone was definitely laying on their horn in a continuous blast that suggested they were either really angry about the traffic or really entertained by the billboard. Possibly both. From my Instagram. My actual Instagram photo. "Oh, that's Sierra," I said, like I'd just figured out which Sierra we were talking about. "Yeah, that's probably about you then." The sound she made wasn't quite a scream and wasn't quite a sob, but was definitely the noise of someone realizing they'd severely miscalculated a situation. Why would you? How could you? People are stopping. Cars are literally stopping to read it and take pictures. Well, it is pretty eye-catching, I agreed. Nina, that's the billboard designer. She really knows how to work with fonts and color contrast. Did you notice the way your name pops? That's called hierarchy in design. Really makes the message. I don't care about design hierarchy. You should, I said. Visual communication is actually super important in modern. Everyone from work drives this way. She was moving into the panic-crying phase, her words coming out in these weird hiccupy gasps. My boss drives this way. My clients drive this way. Oh my God. Oh my God. Everyone is going to see this. That's kind of the point of a billboard, I explained helpfully. Maximum visibility. You wanted something public and memorable, right? Something viral. There was a moment of silence. Not peaceful silence, but the kind of silence that happens right before a volcano erupts or a building collapses. Then, there's another one. Another what? Another billboard. Her voice cracked on the word billboard, like it was physically painful to say. Up ahead. I can see it from here. Oh no. Oh no, 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 no. I could hear her car accelerating, probably speeding to get to the second billboard because humans are fundamentally masochistic creatures who can't help but look at things that hurt them. It's the same instinct that makes people slow down to stare at car accidents or read the comments section on controversial Facebook posts. 30 seconds of heavy breathing and aggressive driving later. IT says return the ring. Demanded a redo. Stay tuned for Season 2 of The Proposal. Catchy, right? I said. I workshopped that one for a while. Wasn't sure about the Season 2 bid. Thought it might be too on the nose, but Nina convinced me it added that extra layer of, "Are there more?" She interrupted, her voice now fully in the realm of hysteria usually reserved for horror movie victims or people who've just seen their credit card bills after the holidays. How many billboards are there? Well, I said, pretending to think about it. I'd hate to spoil the surprise. Where's the fun in that? The noise she made could only be described as a primal howl of rage and despair. More car horns joined the symphony in the background, and I heard someone, a man, sounded middle-aged, yell, "Yeah, Sierra? How much is enough?" Followed by laughter. Random strangers were getting involved. This was going even better than planned. People are yelling at me, Sierra wailed. From their cars. Some guy just gave me a thumbs down. A thumbs down. While driving. That does seem unsafe, I noted. He should really keep both hands on the wheel. I hate you. That's fair, I acknowledged. But let's be honest, you kind of walked into this one. I'm turning around, she announced. I'm going home. We're going to talk about this. Can't, I said. I'm actually heading out. Meeting Ray for breakfast. You remember Ray, my lawyer friend? We're going to have a nice meal and discuss property rights and the legal definition of conditional gifts. Should be riveting. Your lawyer? The panic ratcheted up another notch. Why are you meeting with your lawyer? Oh, you know, I said casually. Just covering my bases. Making sure everything I'm doing is perfectly legal. Which it is, by the way. Nina's company has an excellent legal team. They checked everything twice. Turns out truth is a really solid defense against defamation claims. She was crying now, full-on sobbing while trying to drive, which again, probably not safe. But I was past the point of caring about Sierra's well-being in any meaningful way. Please, she gasped between sobs. Please take them down. I'll do anything. I'll apologize. I'll tell everyone I was wrong. Just please. There's a third one, I interrupted. You're about to see it. Just thought I'd warn you so you don't crash your car. Safety first. No, she whimpered. No, 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 my God. I didn't need to ask what billboard number 3 said. I'd memorized every word, every screenshot, every carefully chosen image that would perfectly capture Sierra's true feelings about our relationship. The screenshots of her texts to her friends, the ones where she called me sweet but too basic and said she deserved something viral and complained that my proposal was giving middle-class energy. The silence on her end lasted about 15 seconds, a lifetime in phone conversation terms. When she finally spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. You screenshotted my texts. I did, I confirmed. They really tell the story better than I ever could, don't you think? A picture's worth 1,000 words, but a screenshot of you calling me basic is worth at least 10,000. Those were private conversations. Between you and 12 of your closest friends, yeah? That's pretty private. almost as private as a 20-foot billboard on a major highway. I paused for effect. Oh, and there's a fourth one. Near your office. Just in case you were thinking about still going to work today. The sound that came through the phone wasn't even words anymore. Just raw, inarticulate anguish mixed with rage, and probably the dawning realization that she'd have to either quit her job or move to a different city or possibly fake her own death and start a new life somewhere remote where billboards don't exist. Why? She finally managed. Why would you do this to me? I leaned back on the couch, watching the traffic camera footage Nina had given me access to. Sure enough, there was Sierra's car, pulled over on the shoulder, surrounded by slowing traffic as people drove by, taking photos, pointing, probably already posting to every social media platform known to humanity. Because you wanted something memorable, I said simply. You wanted something viral. You wanted something that would make people talk for months. You wanted a proposal that would show everyone how special you are. I paused, letting the words sink in. Congratulations, Sierra. You got exactly what you asked for. She was sobbing too hard to respond, which was fine because I wasn't really looking for a response anyway. This wasn't a conversation. It was a closing argument. Oh, and Sierra? I added, just before hanging up. Check billboard number 4. I think you'll find the ending particularly satisfying. Or not. Depends on your perspective, really. I ended the call and immediately blocked her number, knowing she'd either keep calling or start sending text messages that would range from apologetic to threatening to manipulative and back again. I'd seen this show before. I didn't need to watch the reruns. My phone immediately started buzzing with notifications, not from Sierra, but from everyone else. Ray sent a text. Dude, I'm looking at the billboard near my place. You're either going to be a legend or need witness protection. Leo the jeweler sent a photo of billboard number 1 with 3 flame emojis and the message, "That's my boy." Nina sent, "Traffic reports are going insane. We're trending on Twitter. You magnificent chaos agent." And then, because the universe has a sense of humor, my mom called. "Honey," she said when I answered, "why is your father sending me photos of billboards with your ex-girlfriend's name on them?" "It's a long story, Mom. I've got time," she said. "And also, I never liked her anyway. Your grandmother's ring deserved better." I smiled, looking out the window at the city where billboards were currently destroying Sierra's entire social existence, and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, complete and total peace. "Yeah, Mom," I agreed. It really did. After hanging up on Sierra and experiencing the profound satisfaction of blocking her number, a feeling I imagine is similar to finally scratching an itch that's been bothering you for 3 months. I did what any reasonable person would do in my situation. I ordered more coffee, pulled up Twitter, and watched my life become a trending topic in real time. Hashtag billboard breakup was already climbing the charts, sitting pretty at number 7 between some political scandal I didn't care about and a celebrity feud that would be forgotten by tomorrow. But my billboards? Those were eternal. Or at least rented through the end of the month, which in internet terms might as well be eternal. The photos were everywhere. Hundreds of them, taken from every possible angle by commuters who'd apparently decided that documenting Sierra's public humiliation was more important than getting to work on time. Some were artistic. Carefully framed shots with the morning sun glinting off the billboard letters. Others were chaotic, blurry photos clearly taken while driving, which again, safety hazard, but I wasn't about to lecture people on responsible phone usage while I was actively ruining someone's life via outdoor advertising. My personal favorite was a video some guy had posted from his dashcam. You could see his car approaching billboard number 3, the one with the text screenshots, and hear him start laughing so hard, he had to pull over. "Bro," he kept saying between gasps. "Bro, this is insane." The video had 2.3 million views in under an hour. I was basically a producer now. Around 8:47 a.m., right on schedule according to Nina's timeline projections, Sierra would have reached billboard number 4. The grand finale. The piece de resistance. And another thing, of billboard revenge. I'd positioned this one strategically, right across from the parking garage entrance to her office building, impossible to miss, unavoidable even if she tried. Which she probably did try, honestly. If I were in her Louboutin heels, I'd have considered just driving past my office entirely, maybe heading for Mexico or Canada or anywhere that didn't have a functional internet connection. My phone buzzed. Not Sierra. I'd blocked her, and that barrier was holding strong like the emotional Great Wall of China. This was Nina. She just saw number 4, the text read. Security cameras caught her. She sat in her car for 10 minutes, then drove away. Pretty sure she was screaming the whole time, but the footage doesn't have audio. Did she read the whole thing? I texted back. Oh, she read it. She read it about 15 times based on how long she sat there. Then she took a photo. Then she screamed at her phone. Then she took another photo. Very dramatic. Should I send you the footage? Absolutely. The video came through 30 seconds later. Nina was right. It was incredibly dramatic. Sierra's car pulled up to the parking garage entrance, and I could see the exact moment she spotted billboard number 4. Her car stopped so abruptly that the guy behind her had to slam on his brakes, laying on his horn in a way that suggested he was having a really bad morning even before getting caught in the billboard breakup traffic. Billboard number 4 was beautiful. Nina and her design team had outdone themselves. Against a clean white background, in bold black letters that you could probably read from space. Ethan is now single and accepting applications. No proposal required. And below it, in slightly smaller but still very visible text, Grandma's ring donated to Children's Hospital, because real love helps, not humiliates. At the very bottom, in tasteful gray letters, was a QR code and the text, scan to donate to Children's Memorial Hospital in honor of love that actually matters. That last part had been Nina's idea. If you're going to torture a relationship, she'd said, might as well do some good while you're at it. The woman was a philosopher and an artist, truly. In the security footage, I watched Sierra just sit there, staring up at the billboard like it had personally insulted her grandmother and kicked her dog. Her mouth was moving, definitely screaming, like Nina said, and at one point she pounded on her steering wheel so hard I was worried she'd break something. The hand, the wheel, her entire sense of self-worth. Could have been any of them, really. Then came the photo-taking phase. She held up her phone, took a picture, looked at it, took another picture, looked at that one, took a third picture from a slightly different angle like she was trying to find the perspective that would somehow make the billboard say something different. It didn't. The billboard remained stubbornly committed to its message no matter what angle she photographed it from. Finally, after what the timestamp showed was actually 12 minutes, I'd been generous saying 10. She drove away. Not into the parking garage, just away, peeling out with enough force that she probably left tire marks, headed in the direction of anywhere that wasn't here. My phone exploded with texts. Not from Sierra, bless that block function, but from everyone else who'd ever known either of us. Ray, I'm at the hospital. The one you donated to. They're thrilled. Also, you're going to need my services after all because apparently Sierra is considering legal action. Me, let her try? I've got screenshots of screenshots at this point. Ray, that's what I told them. Also, the hospital wants to give you an award. An actual award. For creative philanthropy. Leo, just saw number 4. The QR code is genius. I scanned it and donated. In Sierra's name. Hope that's okay. Nina, we've had 17 companies contact us in the last hour asking about viral billboard campaigns. You've created a whole new marketing category. I'm putting you down as a reference. My college roommate who I hadn't talked to in 3 years. Dude, are you the billboard guy? Please tell me you're the billboard guy. My boss. We need to talk Monday. Not fired. Possibly promoted. Definitely need to talk. Even my dentist texted me. Saw the billboards. Absolutely brutal. Also, you're due for a cleaning. But the best message came from Sierra's mom. Yes, her actual mother. The pot roast lady who'd always been way too good for her daughter's nonsense. I saw the billboards on my drive to church. The text read, I want you to know that I'm not mad. I'm actually a little bit proud. She needed a reality check and you delivered it with a crane and professional lighting. Also, your grandmother's ring going to help sick children is exactly what she would have wanted. You're a good man. Sorry my daughter couldn't see that. I sat there staring at that text for a solid 5 minutes. Feeling emotions I wasn't entirely prepared to process. Vindication, sure. Satisfaction, absolutely. But also something weirdly close to sadness. Not for Sierra, but for what I'd thought we had before I realized we had nothing at all. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, thinking maybe Sierra had borrowed someone's phone to continue screaming at me, but curiosity won out. Is this Ethan? A woman's voice, professional, slightly amused. Depends who's asking. This is Rebecca Chun from the Metro Morning Show. We'd love to have you on tomorrow to talk about the billboards. We're calling it the proposal that broke the internet. Interested? How much does it pay? She laughed. We don't typically pay guests, but I can promise you'll probably get more job offers than you know what to do with. And we'll make sure to plug the children's hospital donation. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. I'm in. By noon, the story had been picked up by every local news outlet and several national ones. Man rejects $22,000 proposal do-over, puts X on blast via billboard, read one headline. When keeping it real goes right, the billboard breakup that restored our faith in petty justice, said another. My personal favorite was from some clickbait site. This man's revenge on his materialistic fiancée will make you believe in karma again. Number 3 will shock you. The Children's Hospital released a statement thanking me for the donation and announcing that the ring, my grandmother's ring, the one Sierra said wasn't good enough, had been auctioned to a private collector for almost $30,000, all of which went directly to their new pediatric wing. They included a photo of the ring with a plaque that read, "Donated in memory of a grandmother who knew the real value of love." I may have cried a little, just a little. Totally normal emotional response to seeing your grandmother's legacy do actual good in the world instead of sitting on the finger of someone who thought love could be measured in Instagram likes. Around 2 p.m., my phone buzzed with a notification from Instagram. Sierra had posted. Against my better judgment and all common sense, I looked. It was a tearful video, her makeup running, filmed in her car with the kind of dramatic lighting that comes from crying while the sun's at the wrong angle. I want to address what's happening, she started, her voice doing that breathy crying thing. My ex-boyfriend has launched a vicious, emotionally abusive campaign against me using public billboards to humiliate and harass me. This is a form of domestic violence, and I want everyone to know that I will not be silenced. The comments were, not what she was hoping for. Girl, you literally told him to spend more money on a second proposal. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes trophy. Domestic violence is a serious issue, and this ain't it, sis. The billboards are sending me skull, skull, skull. How is telling the truth harassment? Make it make sense. Someone had even posted a screenshot of her Pinterest board. Yes, the one titled, "Training Your Man for a Better Proposal," and asked if that wasn't also emotionally manipulative. The thread under that comment was longer than most novels. I closed Instagram and texted Nina. How long do the billboards stay up? You paid through the end of the month, she replied. But between you and me, we might keep them up longer. They're driving so much traffic that other advertisers want the spots next to yours. You're good for business. Capitalism is beautiful sometimes. Isn't it though? I spent the rest of Sunday fielding calls, declining interview requests from questionable sources, and watching my story spread across the internet like a particularly juicy virus. By evening, someone had made a TikTok dance about it. By Monday morning, there would be think pieces about modern relationships, toxic expectations, and whether billboard revenge was the new normal. But for now, in this moment, sitting in my apartment that was slowly becoming just mine again as I mentally cataloged which of Sierra's throw pillows I'd be donating to Goodwill, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Free. The billboards would come down eventually. The internet would move on to the next scandal. Sierra would probably relocate and reinvent herself somewhere far away. But I'd always have the screenshots, the news clips, and the memory of the day I turned $22,000 worth of heartbreak into the most satisfying public service announcement ever created. Worth every penny. By noon on Sunday, I wasn't just viral, I was pandemic-level viral. The kind of viral that makes you understand why they use disease terminology for internet fame, because this thing was spreading faster than common sense at a conspiracy theory convention. Hashtag Billboard Breakup had shot to #1 trending worldwide, beating out a royal wedding announcement and some celebrity who'd apparently adopted a baby giraffe. Sorry, giraffe baby. My pettiness was simply more compelling than your long neck and adorable spots. Sierra's Instagram had exploded overnight. And I mean exploded in the way that sounds good until you realize it's actually a nuclear detonation of your entire social existence. She'd gone from a respectable 3,000 followers, mostly friends, co-workers, and random people who liked her aesthetic photos of coffee cups and sunset selfies, to over 60,000 by lunch. 60,000 people had decided that watching Sierra's public meltdown was worth a follow, like rubberneckers stopping at a car accident, except the car accident had great lighting and a really compelling narrative arc. The comments on her tearful domestic violence video were absolutely merciless. I'm talking scorched earth, no prisoners. The internet has spoken kind of merciless. For every supportive comment saying things like stay strong, queen, or men are trash, there were 50 more that basically amounted to girl, you asked for this with a side of extra entitlement. My favorite comment, which had somehow gotten 47,000 likes of its own. Imagine calling someone emotionally abusive for literally just telling the truth about what you said. The call is coming from inside the house. Bestie. Someone had created a Reddit thread titled, AITA for putting my ex on billboards after she said my $22,000 proposal wasn't good enough. It had 89,000 upvotes and 12,000 comments debating the morality, legality, and pure entertainment value of my actions. The top comment, gilded 17 times, simply said, NTA. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. She wanted viral, she got viral. But here's where things got really interesting. And by interesting, I mean beautifully, catastrophically messy in a way that even I hadn't anticipated. Someone leaked Sierra's Pinterest board. Not just any Pinterest board, but the Pinterest board. The one she'd apparently been curating for months titled, Training Your Man for a Better Proposal. I'm not even kidding. That was the actual title. Training Your Man. Like I was a golden retriever who needed to learn to fetch engagement rings of appropriate carat weight. The board had everything. Photos of celebrity proposals with notes like, this is the minimum acceptable effort. Screenshots of ring prices with annotations about which jewelers were worth it and which were basically mall quality. There was even a full spreadsheet, an actual spreadsheet, ranking different proposal scenarios by Instagram potential, estimated cost, and wow factor. The spreadsheet had columns, multiple columns. Categories included location aesthetics, social media virality potential, ring visibility in photos, and, I cannot make this up, flexibility for outfit changes. My proposal, the one I'd spent $22,000 on, was listed in her spreadsheet. She'd given me a C-, a C-. Her notes section said, and I quote, too domestic, lacks celebrity elements. Ring is vintage, which reads as cheap even though it's not. Overall, sweet but basic. Would need complete redo for social media announcement. The internet absolutely lost its mind. Someone turned the spreadsheet into a meme format. Within hours, people were creating their own versions, training your cat to love you more, training your boss for a better raise, training your parents to stop asking about grandkids. The format went so viral that even brands started using it. Wendy's Twitter posted one titled, Training Your Taste Buds for Better Fast Food, and it got 500,000 likes. But it got worse for Sierra. Or better, depending on your perspective and how much you enjoy watching someone's entire personality get fact-checked by the collective consciousness of social media. Her friend Melanie, and I use that term loosely because this woman's loyalty was apparently held together with dollar store glue and spite, posted a video that started with, since Sierra wants to talk about emotional abuse, let's talk about the group chat. Oh, the group chat. The group chat. Melanie proceeded to leak screenshots from Sierra's friend group text thread spanning back 6 months. This wasn't just about me and the proposal. This was Sierra's entire personality on display. And let me tell you, it was not a good look. Messages about how she trained me to take her to nicer restaurants by claiming she had food allergies at places she deemed too casual. Complaints about how I bought her flowers from Trader Joe's instead of a real florist, and how she had to educate me on appropriate flower spending. A whole conversation about how she'd returned 3 birthday gifts from me because they weren't Instagrammable enough, with photos of said gifts that looked perfectly nice to any normal human but apparently failed some aesthetic test I wasn't aware existed. The worst one, the one that made even me wince a little, was her describing my grandmother's ring as giving Depression-era energy and saying she'd need to gently guide me toward understanding that vintage meant cheap, not sentimental. My grandmother, for the record, had been a badass who survived actual Depression-era poverty, worked as a nurse for 40 years, and saved for decades to buy herself that ring as a symbol of her independence. The ring was appraised at $18,000 and had been in my family for 70 years. But sure, Sierra, it was giving cheap energy. The internet found out about my grandmother's story because someone, probably Nina, honestly, had leaked it to a reporter. Suddenly, I wasn't just Billboard breakup guy. I was the grandson who honored his grandmother's legacy while his ex called it cheap. The narrative had shifted. Hard. A parenting blogger wrote an article titled, "Teaching Our Daughters About Entitlement: What We Can Learn from Sierra." A financial advisor made a TikTok breaking down how $22,000 spent on a single event was financially irresponsible, and how Sierra's expectations were setting up young women for disappointment and debt. Even a relationship therapist weighed in, using Sierra's leaked texts as examples of manipulative behavior disguised as preference communication. Sierra tried to do damage control. She really did. She posted another video, this one clearly filmed after she'd had time to calm down and possibly consult with someone who understood how the internet works. Different lighting, better makeup, more composed tone. "I want to apologize," she started, and I almost felt bad. Almost. "I've done some reflecting, and I realized that my words and actions hurt someone I cared about." The Pinterest board and the spreadsheet were jokes between friends that were taken out of context. I never meant. The comments were already rolling in before she finished the sentence. "The context is you, sis. Jokes between friends is code for I got caught. Not the influencer apology format skull. How do you take a spreadsheet rating your boyfriend's proposal out of context?" Someone created a bingo card of her apology video, with squares for taken out of context. "I'm sorry you were hurt. I'm growing as a person. This has been a learning experience." And the free space in the middle that just said, "No actual accountability." People were posting their completed bingo cards within minutes. She'd hit every square. My phone had become less of a communication device and more of a constant stream of notifications that I'd mostly started ignoring. But one call got through because I'd forgotten to block the number. Sierra's company. Not Sierra herself, her actual employer. A marketing firm that specialized in authentic brand representation and had Sierra's face on their website under "Our Team." "Mr. Davis?" A man's voice, professional but strained. "This is Marcus Webb from Elevate Marketing. I'm calling about Sierra Chun. She doesn't work for me." I said, "You might want to try her directly." "We did. She's not answering." He sighed, the kind of sigh that comes from dealing with a situation that's somehow both hilarious and career-ending. "Look, I'll be direct. We're getting calls from clients. A lot of calls. About the billboards. And the spreadsheet. And the leaked messages where she talked about manipulating you into expensive dates. Sounds like a Sierra problem, not a me problem." "Normally I'd agree," Marcus said, "but one of our major clients is a children's charity. They're not thrilled that someone on our team called your grandmother's donated ring Depression-era energy, when that ring is now funding a pediatric wing." I hadn't considered this angle. The universe was really committed to making Sierra's life difficult in ways even I hadn't planned. "We're going to have to let her go," Marcus continued. "Effective immediately. I wanted to call you first because, honestly, I wanted to make sure you're not planning to sue us for, I don't even know, employing someone who creates spreadsheets rating human beings." "I'm not suing anyone," I said. "I got what I wanted, which was the truth out there and my grandmother's ring doing good in the world." "Between you and me?" Marcus said, his voice dropping. "Good for you, man. She pitched to our clients the same way she treated you. Everything was about metrics and virality, nothing about actual human connection. We should have seen it coming." After he hung up, I sat there processing the fact that Sierra had just lost her job. Not because I'd reported her, not because I'd called her employer, but because her own personality and leaked messages had made her unemployable at a company that valued authenticity. Karma wasn't just real. Karma had a PhD in poetic justice and was working overtime. My phone buzzed. "Ray, you seeing this?" his text said, with a link to Twitter. I clicked it. Someone had created a fake dating profile for Sierra with the bio, looking for a man who understands that $22,000 is just the starting point. Must be comfortable being rated on a spreadsheet. Vintage rings need not apply. It had 3 million impressions. I texted back, "The internet is terrifying." "The internet is justice," Ray replied. Also, her lawyer called me. "She's considering suing you for defamation." I laughed for 5 minutes straight and then hung up. I looked at my blocked calls list. 15 attempts from Sierra's number, plus 6 from numbers I didn't recognize that were probably her using friends' phones. My voicemail was full of messages I would never listen to. The billboards would stay up for 3 more weeks. The internet would probably move on to the next scandal by tomorrow, maybe the day after if we were lucky. But Sierra's name was now permanently attached to spreadsheets, entitlement, and the phrase Depression-era energy. And I was the guy who loved his grandmother enough to put his ex on blast. I could live with that. Monday morning brought 2 things: a threatening letter from Sierra's lawyer and the worst decision she'd made since asking me to redo a $22,000 proposal. The letter arrived via email at 6:47 a.m., probably time to ruin my breakfast. It was 5 pages of legal jargon that basically boiled down to "you're a big meanie, and we're going to sue you for emotional distress, defamation, and invasion of privacy." I forwarded it to Ray with the subject line, LOL. He called me 30 seconds later, laughing so hard I thought he might actually choke. "This is the weakest legal threat I've seen since a guy tried to sue McDonald's for making him fat," he wheezed. "Truth isn't defamation, sweetheart." I literally told her lawyer that exact phrase last week. So we're good. We're better than good. We're bulletproof. She posted half this stuff publicly on her own Instagram, and the rest came from her friends, not you. She's got nothing. Ray shot back a response that was basically the legal equivalent of "nice try, better luck next time," and I figured that was the end of it. I was wrong. At 2:37 p.m., while I was actually trying to do real work instead of refreshing my Twitter mentions every 5 seconds, my doorbell rang. Then it rang again. Then someone started pounding on the door like they were auditioning for a cop show. I checked the peephole and immediately regretted every decision that had led me to this moment. Sierra was standing outside my apartment with a full camera crew. Not like a phone camera, an actual professional setup with lights, a boom mic, and some guy wearing a backward cap holding what looked like a very expensive camera rig. "I know you're in there," she yelled, loud enough that my neighbors were definitely hearing this. "I'm filming this for YouTube, confronting my toxic ex. You can't hide from the truth." I pulled out my phone and hit record on my own camera, then opened the door exactly 6 inches, just enough to be polite, not enough for her to barge in. "You're trespassing," I said calmly, holding up my phone so she could see I was filming too. "Want to make it a collab?" Her face went through about 17 different emotions in 2 seconds, finally landing on rage mixed with confusion. "You don't get to. I'm exposing you. Everyone needs to see what you really are. A guy who tells the truth," I suggested. Novel content, really breaking new ground there. The cameraman, backward cap guy, was looking increasingly uncomfortable, his camera lowering slightly like he was reconsidering his life choices. "Lady," he muttered, "I'm not going to jail for your TikTok." "YouTube," Sierra corrected him shrilly. "It's for YouTube. It's going to get millions of views. So will the video of you trespassing and harassing me," I pointed out. "Want to compare subscriber counts later?" She opened her mouth to respond, probably with something about emotional abuse or gaslighting or whatever buzzword she'd learned from therapy TikTok, but then sirens cut through the air. Beautiful, perfectly timed police sirens, because apparently someone in my building had called the cops about the screaming woman with a film crew in the hallway. 2 officers arrived just in time to see Sierra trying to kick my door, which would have been intimidating except she was wearing those ridiculous stiletto heels that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. The heel snapped on impact with a sound like a gunshot, and she stumbled backward into the cameraman, who definitely caught the whole thing on film. "Ma'am," one of the officers said, already looking tired of this situation, "you need to leave the premises." "He's the one who should leave. He put me on billboards. He ruined my life." "Did he do anything illegal?" the officer asked. Sierra opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "He's emotionally abusive. That's not a crime, ma'am. Trespassing is, though. So is harassment." The cameraman was already packing up his equipment, mumbling something about how this wasn't worth the $200 she was probably paying him. Sierra stood there on one broken heel, mascara running, camera crew abandoning her, police asking for her ID, and me recording every second of it from my doorway. "For the record," I said to my camera, making sure my voice was clear, "I never contacted her. She came here, with a film crew, to my private residence. All on video." The officer nodded. "We'll need that footage, sir." I airdropped it to him on the spot, because I'm helpful like that. They escorted Sierra out of the building. She left one broken heel in the hallway like a really bitter Cinderella, and I closed my door, locked it, and immediately texted Ray. She just showed up at my apartment with a camera crew and tried to kick my door in. Cops were called. I have video. Please tell me you're joking. Wish I was. Her heel broke. It was magnificent. I'm putting this in my Why I Became a Lawyer folder. This is gold. That evening, someone posted the security camera footage from my building's hallway. All of it. The yelling, the failed door kicking, the broken heel, the police arrival, everything. It went viral immediately, because of course it did. The top comment. Karma has style sometimes. Yeah, it really does. Just when I thought things couldn't get more entertaining, Melanie. Sierra's ex-friend and apparently the queen of scorched earth betrayal, dropped a nuclear bomb that made everything before it look like a firecracker. She leaked the spreadsheet. Not the Pinterest one about proposals. The other one. The one Sierra had apparently been maintaining for 2 years, ranking all her friends' boyfriends, fiancés, and husbands like they were contestants on some demented reality show. This thing had columns. So many columns. Ring cost, proposal location aesthetics, social media engagement on announcement post, husband material score, and my personal favorite, overall relationship grade. She'd given herself an A+ for our relationship. Me? I got a C-. Her notes in my row, too domestic. Needs improvement. Ring situation, vintage, concerning. Financial potential, adequate but not impressive. Adequate but not impressive. I'd spent $22,000 trying to impress this woman and got rated adequate. Her company, which had already demoted her after the billboard incident, saw the spreadsheet. Apparently, rating human beings like their Yelp reviews for restaurants isn't great for a marketing firm's image. They fired her. Actually fired her this time, not demoted. Full termination, effective immediately. The billboard company released a statement confirming all posted information was factually verified and approved by legal counsel. Translation: Sierra got fact-checked by Karma, a legal team, and the entire internet simultaneously. She deleted all her social media accounts by Wednesday. A month later, the billboards finally came down. I got a thank you card in the mail. Not from Sierra, obviously, but from her parents. You gave her the lesson we couldn't. It read in her mother's handwriting. Therapy starts next week. Thank you for having the courage we didn't. The Children's Hospital sent a photo of their brand new playroom, bright and cheerful, filled with toys and hope. A small plaque on the wall read, "In memory of Grandma, sponsored by the billboard guy." I cried. Sue me. Sierra, according to mutual acquaintances who couldn't resist updating me, had moved to another state to heal and start fresh. Probably somewhere without billboards. Wyoming, maybe. Do they have billboards in Wyoming? Doesn't matter. As for me, I got job offers from 3 different marketing firms who were apparently very impressed by my ability to turn personal crisis into viral brand awareness. Capitalism is weird, man. My dating profile now gets approximately 800 messages a day. Half are supportive, half are from people who want me to billboard blast their exes. I politely decline. Lightning doesn't strike twice, and honestly, I'm retired from the revenge business. When people ask about my engagement now, I just grin and say one word. Billboard. Worth every single penny. My wife, the CEO, said, "You're sleeping in the guest room until you apologize." I just said, "All right." The next morning, she walked in and said, "Have you come to your senses?" When she found my side of the closet empty and divorce papers on the desk. You know a marriage is in trouble when your wife uses her corporate tone on you at home. Not the, "Honey, can you take out the trash" tone. Not even the "we need to talk" tone that makes every man's spine turn into a slinky. No, I'm talking about the full executive voice, the one she usually reserves for firing middle management or explaining quarterly losses to shareholders who thought investing in her company was a good idea. "Marcus," she said, standing there in her $1,000 Armani blazer like she was about to fire me from my own damn kitchen. "You're sleeping in the guest room until you apologize." Her arms were crossed in that power pose she probably learned from some TED Talk titled, "How to Intimidate Men Without Actually Saying You're Intimidating Them." Her Louboutin heels clicked against our Italian marble floor. The floor I didn't want, by the way, but apparently my opinion on home renovations ranked somewhere between irrelevant and who asked you. For what, you ask? What heinous crime had I committed to deserve exile from the marital bedroom? Did I forget our anniversary? Sleep with her sister? Run over her childhood pet? Nope, none of the above. My unforgivable sin was questioning her genius idea of buying a $6,000 crystal dog statue for our living room. $6,000 for a statue of a poodle that looked like it had been bedazzled by a blind Vegas showgirl with a glue gun addiction. I told her, and I quote, "It looks like a sparkly taxidermy experiment gone wrong." I thought it was funny. Hell, I thought it was accurate. The thing had more rhinestones than a toddler's beauty pageant dress and about as much taste. But Olivia? Oh, Olivia didn't laugh. Her face did that thing where it goes completely still, like when your computer freezes right before it crashes and takes all your unsaved work with it. Apparently, I had embarrassed her aesthetic vision in front of her interior designer, who probably charged $300 an hour to tell rich people that beige is having a moment. So when she delivered her ultimatum, guest room, exile, solitary confinement until I groveled like a peasant begging for scraps, I just looked at her, really looked at her. At this woman I'd married 7 years ago when she was still laughing at my jokes instead of scheduling them into her calendar. At this person who had somehow transformed from the girl who ate pizza in bed and watched terrible reality TV with me into a corporate robot who color-coded her emotions and held quarterly reviews of our relationship. And I said, "All right." Just like that. Calm. No fight. No drama. No raised voice or slammed doors. Just, "all right." Delivered with the same energy as a man accepting a parking ticket from God himself. Annoyed, sure, but also kind of relieved that at least now he knows where he stands. She blinked. Once. Twice. 3 times like a computer trying to process an error message it had never encountered before. She was clearly expecting me to argue, to beg, to launch into some impassioned defense of my right to mock overpriced home decor. She'd probably already prepared her counterarguments, maybe even rehearsed them in the mirror while doing her 47-step skincare routine that cost more than most people's monthly rent. But I didn't give her the satisfaction. I just picked up my phone, grabbed my charger, and headed toward the guest room like a man who'd just been upgraded to first class without even asking. What Olivia didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have known because she was too busy playing chess while I was supposedly playing checkers, was that she'd just handed me the freedom notice I didn't even know I needed. She thought she was punishing me, teaching me a lesson about respect and boundaries and whatever other corporate buzzwords she'd picked up from her leadership seminars. But really? She'd just opened the cage door and told the bird it wasn't allowed to fly. Spoiler alert, the bird was about to soar. As I walked down the hallway, our hallway, decorated with abstract art that looked like someone had sneezed paint on a canvas and called it evocative, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, maybe years. It was light, almost fizzy, like champagne bubbles in my chest. It took me a second to identify it because it had been so long since I'd experienced it in my own home. Relief. Pure, unadulterated relief. I wasn't mad. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't even particularly surprised. I was just done. Done pretending that our marriage was anything more than a business merger that had failed to produce the projected returns. Done walking on eggshells around a woman who treated our home like a showroom and our relationship like a portfolio that needed aggressive rebalancing. The guest room door opened with a soft click, and I stepped inside what would become my kingdom, my fortress, my liberation station. I didn't know it yet, but this room, this supposedly punitive exile, was about to become the best thing that ever happened to me. Olivia wanted me to learn my lesson. Oh, I was about to learn something all right. Just not what she had in mind. I tossed my phone on the nightstand, looked around at the space that was about to become my headquarters for the most satisfying rebellion of my life, and smiled. Actually smiled. The kind of smile that would have worried her if she'd been paying attention to anything other than her own reflection and her stock portfolio. All right, I said again, this time to the empty room. To myself. To the universe that had just handed me an opportunity wrapped in a punishment. Game on, Olivia. Game on. Little did she know, her CEO command was about to backfire so spectacularly that even her fancy business degree and her shelf full of leadership books wouldn't be able to fix it. She wanted to treat our marriage like a corporation? Fine. Consider this my resignation letter, pending approval. And trust me, approval was coming. I was about to make sure of it. Here's the thing about men that women never seem to understand. We don't actually mind sleeping in guest rooms. In fact, Give us a decent mattress, a door that locks, and minimal emotional warfare, and we're basically living our best lives. It's like being sent to detention and discovering they've got Xbox and unlimited snacks. You walk in expecting punishment and walk out wondering why you didn't commit the crime sooner. Our guest room, which Olivia had decorated during one of her minimalist luxury phases, had everything a man could want. A 65-inch smart TV mounted on the wall like a window into freedom. Blackout curtains that turned noon into midnight with one satisfying pull. And here's the real kicker. A memory foam mattress that was somehow better than the $12,000 monstrosity in the master bedroom that Olivia had insisted would align our spines and our spirits. Newsflash. My spine was perfectly happy being misaligned if it meant I didn't have to sleep on what felt like a very expensive wooden plank covered in Egyptian cotton lies. The first night felt less like exile and more like a spa retreat I didn't know I'd booked. I stretched out diagonally across the bed. Diagonally. People, do you understand the luxury of diagonal sleeping? And experienced something I hadn't felt in years. Silence. Beautiful, golden, uninterrupted silence. No snoring, which Olivia swore she didn't do but absolutely did, sounding like a congested bear trying to breathe through a harmonica. No midnight podcast playing about women in leadership or breaking the glass ceiling at volume level 11 because apparently her AirPods were charging. No alarm screaming at 4 in the goddamn morning so she could make her 6 a.m. hot yoga class where she and her equally terrifying friends would pretzel themselves into positions that looked less like exercise and more like auditions for Cirque du Soleil's corporate division. I slept like a baby. No, scratch that. I slept like a grown man who'd finally escaped from a sleep prison he didn't know he was in. I woke up at 8:30, naturally, without an alarm, feeling like I'd been resurrected. My back didn't hurt. My jaw wasn't clenched. I didn't immediately reach for my phone to check what fresh hell awaited me in the form of Olivia's color-coded daily schedule that somehow always included tasks for me that I'd never agreed to. By day 2, I wasn't just accepting my exile. I was thriving in it. I started calling it the suite, like I was living in a boutique hotel that just happened to be located in my own house. I'd make my coffee in the morning, walk around in my bathrobe like Hugh Hefner minus the bunnies and moral bankruptcy, and say things to myself like, room service is running a bit late today, or I should speak to the concierge about the thread count on these sheets. It was stupid. It was ridiculous. It was absolutely hilarious, and there was nobody around to tell me to stop, which made it even better. I brought in my laptop, set up a little workspace by the window, and started actually getting work done. Turns out, when you're not being interrupted every 15 minutes by someone who wants to circle back on whether we should get matching towel sets or discussing the energy flow of the living room, you can accomplish things. Revolutionary concept, I know. Meanwhile, Olivia strutted around the house like she was the queen of emotional consequences, ruler of the kingdom of teaching Marcus a lesson. I'd see her in the hallway, and she'd give me this look, the one that said, "Are you suffering yet? Have you learned your lesson? Are you ready to apologize and admit that I am right about everything, including overpriced crystal animals?" She'd tilt her chin up just slightly, her power pose in full effect, probably imagining herself as some kind of domestic justice warrior fighting the good fight against husbands who dared to have opinions about interior design. She even told her assistant, "I know this because I overheard her on speakerphone while I was getting water from the kitchen. He's learning humility." She said it with such satisfaction, such confidence, like she was reporting positive quarterly results to her board of directors. Marcus is in the guest room, reflecting on his behavior. It's a growth opportunity for him. A growth opportunity. I almost choked on my water. Lady, the only thing growing was my appreciation for personal space and my realization that I'd been living in an emotional hostage situation disguised as a marriage. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly fathom in her perfectly organized, color-coded, vision board brain, was that I wasn't learning humility. I was learning peace. Real, actual, honest-to-God peace. The kind of peace you read about in those meditation books she bought and never opened. The ones that sat on her nightstand looking decorative and unread, just like our marriage vows apparently. Every morning, I'd wake up in the suite, make my coffee the way I liked it, strong enough to wake the dead. None of that oat milk nonsense she'd insisted was better for inflammation, and I'd sit by the window watching the sunrise. When was the last time I'd watched a sunrise? I couldn't remember. Olivia's schedule had us operating on vampire hours, late nights for her networking events that were just excuses to drink expensive wine with other corporate climbers, and early mornings for her wellness routines that somehow made her less well and more stressed. I started noticing things I'd forgotten about myself, like how I actually enjoyed reading in the morning instead of immediately diving into emails. How I liked taking long showers without someone knocking on the door asking if I was almost done because she needed to prepare for her day. How I could watch whatever I wanted on TV without negotiating like I was brokering a Middle East peace treaty. The suite had everything I needed and nothing I didn't. No throw pillows that were apparently decorative only and not for actual human use. No candles that cost $40 each and smelled like Mediterranean fig and privilege. No abstract art that I was supposed to appreciate because some gallery owner said it was important. Just a bed, a TV, some basic furniture, and the sweet absence of judgment. By day 3, I'd completely settled in. I brought over my favorite books, the ones Olivia said were cluttering up the aesthetic of our bedroom. I hung my vintage concert posters that she'd banned to the garage because they didn't match the vision. I even brought in my old college mini fridge and stocked it with beer. Real beer, not the organic, locally sourced, artisanal garbage she insisted on serving when her friends came over. The suite became my kingdom, and I was a very content king. Olivia would walk past the closed door, and I could practically feel her confusion radiating through the walls. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I was supposed to be miserable, desperate to return to her good graces, willing to apologize for the crime of having a sense of humor. Instead, I was in there living my best life, probably smiling more than I had in years. She had no idea that her punishment was actually my liberation. That every day she made me stay in the suite was another day I remembered what it felt like to be myself. To breathe without permission. To exist without constant correction. The CEO of our marriage had made a critical strategic error. She'd given me a taste of freedom, and now there was no going back. Game recognized game, Olivia. And I was just getting started. While Olivia played CEO of our marriage, strutting around the house like she was managing a Fortune 500 company instead of a rapidly deteriorating relationship, I started my own little investigation. And let me tell you, when a man has time, privacy, and a growing suspicion that his wife is more full of it than a politician during election season, he can accomplish some pretty impressive detective work. It started innocently enough. I was lying in the suite one evening, scrolling through my phone, when I realized I hadn't checked our joint bank account in about 3 months. Why would I? I trusted Olivia. She was the financially savvy one, the spreadsheet queen, the woman who could tell you exactly how much we spent on groceries in the third quarter of 2023, but couldn't remember my birthday without a calendar reminder. I figured our money was in good hands. Organized hands, color-coded hands, hands that had never met an Excel formula they didn't love. Boy, was I wrong. I logged into our account, expecting to see the usual stuff: mortgage payment, utilities, her monthly spa membership that cost more than some people's car payments, my gym membership that I never used but kept meaning to cancel. Normal married people expenses. What I found instead made me sit up so fast, I nearly gave myself whiplash. There were purchases from boutiques I'd never heard of, places with names like Etoile Privée and Maison de Luxe that sounded less like stores and more like expensive French diseases. We're talking charges in the thousands. $2,000 here, $3,000 there. Like she was playing Monopoly with real money and had decided Park Place wasn't expensive enough. I scrolled further, my thumb moving faster as my blood pressure climbed. Designer handbag for $1,000. Exclusive member event at some club I'd never heard of, $1,500. Dinner at a restaurant that apparently didn't believe in publishing their prices because if you have to ask, you can't afford it. $800 for 2 people. 2 people. I lived with Olivia. I knew for a fact she hadn't taken me to any $800 dinners lately. Our last date night had been 3 months ago at an Italian place where she spent the entire time on her phone dealing with a work emergency that turned out to be choosing between 2 font options for a presentation. So who the hell was person number 2? But wait, it gets better. Oh, does it get better? I kept scrolling, my detective instincts now fully activated, and found a series of random wire transfers. Not to companies or utilities or anything that made sense. No, These were going to personal accounts, amounts ranging from $500 to $2,000, happening like clockwork every couple of weeks. And then, and this is where I actually laughed out loud in my darkened guest room like a supervillain who just discovered his nemesis's weakness. I found it. One suspicious $18,000 consulting payment to someone named Leon Price. Leon Price. Even the name sounded like it belonged to a guy who wore too much cologne and called women sweetheart, unironically. I did what any rational person in the digital age would do. I Googled him. And there he was, in all his glory, plastered across Instagram like a walking advertisement for everything wrong with social media. Leon Price, business coach and life optimization specialist. His profile picture showed him leaning against a BMW convertible that he definitely didn't own, wearing sunglasses that probably cost more than my first car, flexing muscles that had clearly been acquainted with both a gym and some questionable supplements. His bio read, helping executives reach their full potential flexed biceps DM for coaching inquiries rocket, because nothing says legitimate business professional like rocket ship emojis and flexing bicep symbols. I scrolled through his posts, each one more ridiculous than the last. Gym selfies caption, grind never stops flexed biceps fire, taken at what appeared to be 5 a.m., because apparently sleeping is for people who don't want to be optimized. Motivational quotes stolen from people way smarter than him, slapped over pictures of him looking pensively at sunsets or standing on mountaintops he probably drove to. Videos of him doing burpees in designer sneakers while talking about crushing your limiting beliefs and manifesting abundance. And my personal favorite, a photo of him holding a copy of the 48 Laws of Power like it was the Bible, captioned, knowledge is the ultimate flex books 100 points. This was the guy my wife had paid $18,000 to. This bargain bin Tony Robbins knockoff who probably learned everything he knew about business from YouTube videos and motivational Instagram accounts. I wasn't jealous. Let me be clear about that. I wasn't sitting there in my guest room feeling threatened by some guy who looked like he bought his personality from the clearance section at Douchebags R Us. I was just amazed. Genuinely, truly amazed at how dumb betrayal could look when it was wearing designer sneakers and posting thirst traps disguised as motivation. Because let's be honest, you don't pay someone $18,000 for business coaching unless they're coaching you in something that has nothing to do with business. You don't have secret wire transfers and mysterious dinners for two unless you're trying to keep something very specific under wraps. And you definitely don't exile your husband to the guest room over a crystal dog statue unless you're feeling guilty about something way bigger than home decor. The pieces were falling into place like a jigsaw puzzle designed by an idiot. Olivia's sudden late nights at the office. Her new obsession with going to the gym, something she'd never cared about before because she was a yoga person, not a weights and protein shakes person. The way she'd started dressing differently, wearing tighter clothes, more makeup, spending even more time on her appearance than usual, which, considering she already spent about 2 hours a day on her routine, was saying something. And then there were the phone calls. The ones where she'd suddenly get up and leave the room, talking in a hushed voice about strategies and optimization and reaching new levels. I'd thought she was just being her usual corporate robot self, probably discussing quarterly projections or synergy or whatever other buzzwords made her feel important. But now those conversations took on a whole new meaning. I sat there in the suite, my phone still glowing in my hand, and felt something shift inside me. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It wasn't even hurt, which probably says something about the state of our marriage that I should have paid attention to years ago. It was clarity. Pure, crystalline clarity. Like someone had finally cleaned the windshield of my life and I could actually see where I was going. Olivia thought she was so smart, so clever, so far above me with her business degree and her leadership seminars and her network of equally insufferable corporate climbers. She thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers, thought she had me exactly where she wanted me. Punished, exiled, learning my lesson in the guest room like a bad dog. What she didn't know was that she'd just given me all the ammunition I needed. Every transaction, every transfer, every secret payment to her business coach, with the IQ of a motivational poster. It was all right there, documented in our joint account like a trail of breadcrumbs leading straight to her own destruction. So I started planning. Quietly, efficiently, methodically. like a man who'd just realized he wasn't playing checkers or chess. He was playing the long game, and he'd been underestimated for far too long. I opened a new note on my phone and started typing. Screenshots of transactions, dates and times, amounts and recipients. I documented everything with the kind of attention to detail that would have made Olivia proud if she wasn't about to be on the receiving end of it. This wasn't about revenge. Well, okay, maybe it was a little about revenge. But more than that, it was about justice. It was about a man who'd been treated like an employee in his own marriage finally deciding to file the most satisfying paperwork of his life. Leon Price and his gym selfies had no idea what was coming, and neither did Olivia. The investigation had just begun, and I was about to get my MBA in getting even. While Olivia thought she was punishing me with guest room exile, teaching me valuable lessons about respecting her aesthetic vision and staying in my lane, I was building my escape plan like it was a startup company destined for a billion-dollar IPO. And let me tell you, I approached it with the same level of dedication that she approached literally everything in her life, with obsessive attention to detail, strategic planning, and a PowerPoint presentation's worth of organization. Except my presentation was titled Operation Get the Hell Out, and the only stakeholder who mattered was me. Step 1. New bank account. This was crucial. I wasn't about to let another dime of my hard-earned money disappear into the black hole of Olivia's spending habits, or worse, fund any more business coaching sessions with Leon Grind Never Stops Price. So during my lunch break on a Tuesday, while Olivia was probably at some networking lunch talking about disruption and innovation and other words that sound important but mean nothing, I walked into a different bank across town, the kind of place where nobody knew me or my soon-to-be ex-wife. The banker, a cheerful woman named Sandra who looked like she'd seen every kind of financial drama imaginable, barely blinked when I told her I needed to open an individual account. Rough patch? She asked, her tone sympathetic but not pushy, like a bartender who knows when to listen and when to just pour the drink. You could say that, I replied, signing the forms with the kind of satisfaction usually reserved for crossing the finish line of a marathon. Let's just say I'm restructuring my assets. Smart man, Sandra said, sliding my new debit card across the desk. I've seen too many people wait until it's too late. You're being proactive. Proactive. I like that. It sounded so much better than paranoid or preparing for divorce. It sounded like something Olivia would say in one of her business meetings. We need to be proactive about our market position. Well, guess what, honey? I'm being proactive about my exit strategy. Step 2. Move company ownership documents under my name only. Now, this required some finesse. See, when I started my furniture restoration business 12 years ago, back when Olivia was still in grad school and I was working out of a garage that smelled like wood stain and broken dreams, I'd made the mistake of adding her name to certain documents. Not because she'd contributed anything to the business, mind you. She couldn't tell a dovetail joint from a butt joint if her life depended on it, and her idea of restoration was throwing out old things and buying new ones at markup prices that would make a used car salesman blush. No, I'd added her name because I was young and stupid and in love, and she'd convinced me it was romantic and showed trust and what married couples do. What it actually showed was that I needed to have my head examined. But hey, we all make mistakes. Some people get bad haircuts. I gave my wife partial ownership of my business. Tomato, tomato. Fortunately, I'd kept meticulous records. Every receipt, every invoice, every bit of documentation showing that I, and I alone, had built this company from the ground up. I had proof of every piece of equipment I'd purchased with my own money, every client I'd personally brought in, every late night I'd spent sanding and staining and bringing broken furniture back to life, while Olivia was out building her network at wine bars that charged $20 for a glass. I scheduled a meeting with my accountant, Jerry, a guy who'd been doing my books since the beginning and had witnessed the entire trajectory of my marriage from hopeful beginning to current dumpster fire. Jerry, I said, sitting across from him in his cluttered office that somehow made me feel more at home than my actual home. I need to clean up the business ownership structure. Jerry, bless him, didn't even ask questions. He just nodded like he'd been expecting this call for years. Say no more. I'll pull the documents and we'll get everything properly sorted. How soon do you need this done? Yesterday, I said. I'll have it ready by Friday, he replied, already typing away at his computer. Marcus, for what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. I've seen your books. I know who actually runs that business. That's the thing about good accountants. They see the truth in numbers that people try to hide in words. Step 3. Call Tina. Tina Rodriguez, my old college friend who'd gone on to become one of the most ruthless divorce attorneys in the city. We'd kept in touch over the years, mostly through occasional text messages and birthday cards, but I knew her reputation. She was half pit bull, half saint. She'd fight like hell for her clients, but only if she believed they deserved it. Lucky for me, I had an airtight case and a folder full of evidence that would make her job almost too easy. I called her on a Wednesday evening, sitting in the suite with the door locked and my voice low. Tina, it's Marcus Ford. I need a lawyer. There was a pause, then her distinctive laugh, the kind that suggested she'd heard this story 1,000 times before. Marcus, let me guess, the wife? The wife, I confirmed. Tell me everything, she said, and I could hear her already pulling out a notepad, her lawyer brain switching into gear. And don't leave out any details. I want transaction records, dates, names, everything. So I told her about the guest room exile, about the $6,000 crystal dog that started this whole avalanche, about Leon Price and his $18,000 business coaching that definitely wasn't about business, about the secret wire transfers and the mysterious dinners for two and the late nights at the office that smelled suspiciously like expensive cologne and bad decisions. When I finished, there was another pause, longer this time, and then Tina let out a low whistle. Marcus, you married a boardroom tyrant with a side hustle and stupidity. This is going to be almost too easy. Correction, I replied, feeling a smile spread across my face for the first time in what felt like forever. I married the marketing department's motivational poster. All style, no substance, and completely interchangeable with 1,000 other identical versions. Tina laughed again, the sound of it making me feel like maybe, just maybe, I was going to come out of this okay. I like it. Okay, here's what we're going to do. First, I need you to document everything. Every transaction, every conversation, every weird behavior pattern. Get me bank statements, credit card records, phone bills if you can. Second, don't, and I mean don't, let her know you're onto her. Keep playing the exiled husband role. Let her think she's winning. She already thinks she's winning, I said. She told her assistant, I'm learning humility. Perfect. Let her keep thinking that. Meanwhile, we're going to build a case so solid that even a judge with a hangover could see through her bullshit. How soon do you want to move on this? How soon can you have the papers ready? For you? With evidence this good? I can have divorce papers drafted by end of week. They'll be so airtight she'll need a team of lawyers just to understand why she's screwed. We got to work. Over the next few days, Tina and I collaborated like we were planning a military operation, which, in a way, we were. She'd send me lists of documents she needed, and I'd deliver them with the efficiency of a FedEx driver on a deadline. Bank statements showing the pattern of suspicious transactions. Screenshots of Leon Price's Instagram feed, complete with his ridiculous motivational quotes and gym selfies. Credit card bills showing charges at restaurants and hotels on nights when Olivia had supposedly been working late. Every piece of evidence was another nail in the coffin of our marriage, and I was hammering them in with the enthusiasm of a carpenter who'd finally found his calling. Tina organized everything into a folder she called Exhibit A through Z. How to lose half your stuff in 30 days or less. Marcus, she said during one of our phone calls, her voice filled with what I can only describe as professional glee. I've been doing this for 15 years, and this is one of the most clear-cut cases I've ever seen. She's made every mistake in the book. It's like she wanted to get caught. She didn't want to get caught. I corrected. She just thought she was too smart to get caught. There's a difference. Well, she thought wrong. By the time we're done, the only thing she'll be optimizing is her explanation to her friends about how she lost everything. I hung up that night feeling something I hadn't felt in 7 years of marriage. Hope. Real, tangible hope that there was life after Olivia, that I could actually be happy again, that I didn't have to spend the rest of my life sleeping in guest rooms and apologizing for having opinions. The exit strategy was coming together beautifully, each piece falling into place like a well-crafted dovetail joint. And the best part? Olivia had no idea. She was still walking around the house like a CEO who'd successfully put her underperforming employee in his place. completely oblivious to the fact that her employee had just filed his resignation and was about to walk out with the entire company. The guest room became my headquarters, my war room, my personal Pentagon for Operation Get the Hell Out. I even had a whiteboard, a small one I'd picked up from Target during my lunch break, the kind college kids use for grocery lists and motivational quotes. Except mine wasn't covered in inspiration porn or reminders to buy milk. No, mine was titled in bold black marker, Operation Freedom, and underneath it was a strategic breakdown that would have made any military general proud. On the left side, I had a timeline. Key dates, deadlines, tasks that needed to be completed before D-Day, Divorce Day, that is. On the right side, I had an inventory list, carefully documenting which items in our house were actually mine versus which ones Olivia had claimed through a combination of executive decision-making and my own spineless agreement over the years. Turns out, when you actually sit down and think about it, most of the stuff in a house accumulated during a bad marriage belongs to nobody, because nobody actually likes any of it. It's all just expensive garbage you bought to fill empty spaces, both literal and emotional. I started labeling things. Subtly, strategically, like a cat marking its territory. Except instead of spray, I used tiny blue tape marks that Olivia would never notice because she was too busy looking at her phone or admiring her reflection or doing whatever it is that corporate narcissists do when they're alone. My tools in the garage, blue tape. The furniture I'd personally restored, pieces I'd spent hours bringing back to life with my own hands. Blue tape on the bottom where nobody would see. My watches, my books, the vintage record player I'd had since college that Olivia hated because it didn't fit the aesthetic, all marked with my little blue indicators of ownership. It felt petty. It felt small. It felt absolutely necessary because I knew exactly how this was going to go down. Olivia would try to claim everything. She'd walk around with her lawyer pointing at stuff saying community property and marital assets, like she was conducting an auction. But I had news for her. When you can prove you personally owned something before the marriage or purchased it with your own documented funds, that's called separate property, sweetheart. And I had receipts. Literal receipts. Going back years. I started packing quietly at night, while Olivia was in her study doing her investor calls that usually involved a lot of laughter and wine consumption and very little actual discussion of investments. I'd carefully remove items from shelves, wrap them in old newspapers, and place them in boxes I'd hidden in the back of my closet in the suite. Nothing she'd miss immediately. Nothing that would tip her off. Just my personal items, my memories, the pieces of myself that I'd slowly lost over 7 years of marriage to a woman who thought my entire personality was a rough draft that needed editing. One night, while packing up some old photo albums, the kind from before everything went digital, when we still smiled at each other like we meant it, I found a picture of us from our wedding day. Olivia looked stunning, obviously. She'd spent more money on that wedding than some people spend on cars, making sure every detail was perfect, every angle Instagram-worthy before Instagram was even a thing. But it was my face in the photo that caught me off guard. I looked happy, genuinely, stupidly, naively happy. Like a golden retriever who'd just been adopted and had no idea he was about to spend the next 7 years being yelled at for shedding. I stared at that picture for a long moment, wondering when exactly it all went wrong. Was it gradual? Or was there a specific moment when Olivia stopped being the woman I married and turned into the CEO of Marcus's Inadequacy? I couldn't pinpoint it. It was like watching a sunset. You don't notice the exact second the sun disappears. You just suddenly realize it's dark and you're cold, and you should have gone inside hours ago. I packed the photo album, not out of sentimentality, but because it was mine. My memories, even the ones that turned sour. Meanwhile, upstairs in the main part of the house, the part I'd started thinking of as enemy territory, Olivia was living her best delusional life. She'd invited her friends over for wine night, which was apparently a weekly thing now. I could hear them through the ceiling of the suite, their laughter echoing down through the expensive hardwood floors like the sound of hyenas circling a wounded animal. I decided to make an appearance. Not because I wanted to, but because laying low meant acting normal, and normal Marcus occasionally left his exile to get water or food or pretend he still lived in his own house. I walked into the kitchen, where Olivia and 3 of her equally terrifying friends were perched on bar stools like well-dressed vultures, each holding a wine glass that probably cost more than my first apartment's security deposit. They all turned to look at me when I entered, their conversation stopping mid-sentence. The silence was thick enough to cut with a knife, which, coincidentally, I was reaching for to make myself a sandwich because a man's got to eat, even in enemy territory. "Oh, Marcus," one of them said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. This was Jennifer, or Jessica, or some other J name that belonged to women who wore athleisure as formal wear and thought brunch was a personality trait. "Still in exile?" I smiled, pulling out the bread and peanut butter like I didn't have a care in the world. "Yep, living the dream in the suite. It's like a vacation that never ends." They giggled, that particular brand of wine-soaked laughter that women do when they think they're in on a joke. "Poor Marcus," another one said. This was definitely a Stephanie or a Samantha. All of Olivia's friends had names that sounded like they belonged in a country club directory. "Learning his lesson?" "Oh, absolutely," I replied, spreading peanut butter with the precision of a man who'd achieved inner peace. "Learning all sorts of things, mostly about myself. It's very enlightening." Olivia shot me a look. The guest room became my headquarters, my war room, my personal Pentagon for Operation Get the Hell Out. I even had a whiteboard, a small one I'd picked up from Target during my lunch break, the kind college kids use for grocery lists and motivational quotes. Except mine wasn't covered in inspiration porn or reminders to buy milk. No, mine was titled in bold black marker, Operation Freedom, and underneath it was a strategic breakdown that would have made any military general proud. On the left side, I had a timeline. Key dates, deadlines, tasks that needed to be completed before D-Day, Divorce Day, that is. On the right side, I had an inventory list, carefully documenting which items in our house were actually mine versus which ones Olivia had claimed through a combination of executive decision-making and my own spineless agreement over the years. Turns out, when you actually sit down and think about it, most of the stuff in a house accumulated during a bad marriage belongs to nobody, because nobody actually likes any of it. It's all just expensive garbage you bought to fill empty spaces, both literal and emotional. I started labeling things. Subtly, strategically, like a cat marking its territory. Except instead of spray, I used tiny blue tape marks that Olivia would never notice because she was too busy looking at her phone or admiring her reflection or doing whatever it is that corporate narcissists do when they're alone. My tools in the garage, blue tape. The furniture I'd personally restored, pieces I'd spent hours bringing back to life with my own hands. Blue tape on the bottom where nobody would see. My watches, my books, the vintage record player I'd had since college that Olivia hated because it didn't fit the aesthetic, all marked with my little blue indicators of ownership. It felt petty. It felt small. It felt absolutely necessary because I knew exactly how this was going to go down. Olivia would try to claim everything. She'd walk around with her lawyer pointing at stuff saying community property and marital assets, like she was conducting an auction. But I had news for her. When you can prove you personally owned something before the marriage or purchased it with your own documented funds, that's called separate property, sweetheart. And I had receipts. Literal receipts. Going back years. I started packing quietly at night, while Olivia was in her study doing her investor calls that usually involved a lot of laughter and wine consumption and very little actual discussion of investments. I'd carefully remove items from shelves, wrap them in old newspapers, and place them in boxes I'd hidden in the back of my closet in the suite. Nothing she'd miss immediately. Nothing that would tip her off. Just my personal items, my memories, the pieces of myself that I'd slowly lost over 7 years of marriage to a woman who thought my entire personality was a rough draft that needed editing. One night, while packing up some old photo albums, the kind from before everything went digital, when we still smiled at each other like we meant it, I found a picture of us from our wedding day. Olivia looked stunning, obviously. She'd spent more money on that wedding than some people spend on cars, making sure every detail was perfect, every angle Instagram-worthy before Instagram was even a thing. But it was my face in the photo that caught me off guard. I looked happy, genuinely, stupidly, naively happy. Like a golden retriever who'd just been adopted and had no idea he was about to spend the next 7 years being yelled at for shedding. I stared at that picture for a long moment, wondering when exactly it all went wrong. Was it gradual? Or was there a specific moment when Olivia stopped being the woman I married and turned into the CEO of Marcus's inadequacy? I couldn't pinpoint it. It was like watching a sunset. You don't notice the exact second the sun disappears. You just suddenly realize it's dark and you're cold, and you should have gone inside hours ago. I packed the photo album, not out of sentimentality, but because it was mine. My memories, even the ones that turned sour. Meanwhile, upstairs in the main part of the house, the part I'd started thinking of as enemy territory, Olivia was living her best delusional life. She'd invited her friends over for wine night, which was apparently a weekly thing now. I could hear them through the ceiling of the suite, their laughter echoing down through the expensive hardwood floors like the sound of hyenas circling a wounded animal. I decided to make an appearance. Not because I wanted to, but because laying low meant acting normal, and normal Marcus occasionally left his exile to get water or food or pretend he still lived in his own house. I walked into the kitchen, where Olivia and three of her equally terrifying friends were perched on bar stools like well-dressed vultures, each holding a wine glass that probably cost more than my first apartment's security deposit. They all turned to look at me when I entered, their conversation stopping mid-sentence. The silence was thick enough to cut with a knife, which, coincidentally, I was reaching for to make myself a sandwich because a man's got to eat, even in enemy territory. "Oh, Marcus," one of them said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. This was Jennifer, or Jessica, or some other J name that belonged to women who wore athleisure as formal wear and thought brunch was a personality trait. "Still in exile?" I smiled, pulling out the bread and peanut butter like I didn't have a care in the world. "Yep, living the dream in the suite. It's like a vacation that never ends." They giggled, that particular brand of wine-soaked laughter that women do when they think they're in on a joke. "Poor Marcus," another one said. This was definitely a Stephanie or a Samantha. All of Olivia's friends had names that sounded like they belonged in a country club directory. "Learning his lesson?" "Oh, absolutely," I replied, spreading peanut butter with the precision of a man who'd achieved inner peace. "Learning all sorts of things, mostly about myself. It's very enlightening." Olivia shot me a look. The guest room became my headquarters, my war room, my personal Pentagon for Operation Get the Hell Out. I even had a whiteboard, a small one I'd picked up from Target during my lunch break, the kind college kids use for grocery lists and motivational quotes. Except mine wasn't covered in inspiration porn or reminders to buy milk. No, mine was titled in bold black marker, Operation Freedom, and underneath it was a strategic breakdown that would have made any military general proud. On the left side, I had a timeline. Key dates, deadlines, tasks that needed to be completed before D-Day, Divorce Day, that is. On the right side, I had an inventory list, carefully documenting which items in our house were actually mine versus which ones Olivia had claimed through a combination of executive decision-making and my own spineless agreement over the years. Turns out, when you actually sit down and think about it, most of the stuff in a house accumulated during a bad marriage belongs to nobody, because nobody actually likes any of it. It's all just expensive garbage you bought to fill empty spaces, both literal and emotional. I started labeling things. Subtly, strategically, like a cat marking its territory. Except instead of spray, I used tiny blue tape marks that Olivia would never notice because she was too busy looking at her phone or admiring her reflection or doing whatever it is that corporate narcissists do when they're alone. My tools in the garage, blue tape. The furniture I'd personally restored, pieces I'd spent hours bringing back to life with my own hands. Blue tape on the bottom where nobody would see. My watches, my books, the vintage record player I'd had since college that Olivia hated because it didn't fit the aesthetic, all marked with my little blue indicators of ownership. It felt petty. It felt small. It felt absolutely necessary because I knew exactly how this was going to go down. Olivia would try to claim everything. She'd walk around with her lawyer pointing at stuff saying community property and marital assets, like she was conducting an auction. But I had news for her. When you can prove you personally owned something before the marriage or purchased it with your own documented funds, that's called separate property, sweetheart. And I had receipts. Literal receipts. Going back years. I started packing quietly at night, while Olivia was in her study doing her investor calls that usually involved a lot of laughter and wine consumption and very little actual discussion of investments. I'd carefully remove items from shelves, wrap them in old newspapers, and place them in boxes I'd hidden in the back of my closet in the suite. Nothing she'd miss immediately. Nothing that would tip her off. Just my personal items, my memories, The pieces of myself that I'd slowly lost over 7 years of marriage to a woman who thought my entire personality was a rough draft that needed editing. One night, while packing up some old photo albums, the kind from before everything went digital, when we still smiled at each other like we meant it, I found a picture of us from our wedding day. Olivia looked stunning, obviously. She'd spent more money on that wedding than some people spend on cars, making sure every detail was perfect. Every angle Instagram-worthy before Instagram was even a thing. But it was my face in the photo that caught me off guard. I looked happy. Genuinely, stupidly, naively happy. Like a golden retriever who'd just been adopted and had no idea he was about to spend the next 7 years being yelled at for shedding. I stared at that picture for a long moment, wondering when exactly it all went wrong. Was it gradual? Or was there a specific moment when Olivia stopped being the woman I married and turned into the CEO of Marcus's inadequacy? I couldn't pinpoint it. It was like watching a sunset. You don't notice the exact second the sun disappears. You just suddenly realize it's dark and you're cold, and you should have gone inside hours ago. I packed the photo album, not out of sentimentality, but because it was mine. My memories, even the ones that turned sour. Meanwhile, upstairs in the main part of the house, the part I'd started thinking of as enemy territory, Olivia was living her best delusional life. She'd invited her friends over for wine night, which was apparently a weekly thing now. I could hear them through the ceiling of the suite, their laughter echoing down through the expensive hardwood floors like the sound of hyenas circling a wounded animal. I decided to make an appearance. Not because I wanted to, but because laying low meant acting normal, and normal Marcus occasionally left his exile to get water or food or pretend he still lived in his own house. I walked into the kitchen, where Olivia and 3 of her equally terrifying friends were perched on bar stools like well-dressed vultures, each holding a wine glass that probably cost more than my first apartment's security deposit. They all turned to look at me when I entered, their conversation stopping mid-sentence. The silence was thick enough to cut with a knife, which, coincidentally, I was reaching for to make myself a sandwich because a man's got to eat, even in enemy territory. "Oh, Marcus," one of them said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. This was Jennifer, or Jessica, or some other J name that belonged to women who wore athleisure as formal wear and thought brunch was a personality trait. "Still in exile?" I smiled, pulling out the bread and peanut butter like I didn't have a care in the world. "Yep, living the dream in the suite. It's like a vacation that never ends." They giggled, that particular brand of wine-soaked laughter that women do when they think they're in on a joke. "Poor Marcus," another one said. This was definitely a Stephanie or a Samantha. All of Olivia's friends had names that sounded like they belonged in a country club directory. "Learning his lesson?" "Oh, absolutely," I replied, spreading peanut butter with the precision of a man who'd achieved inner peace. "Learning all sorts of things, mostly about myself. It's very enlightening." Olivia shot me a look, one that was probably supposed to communicate, "Don't embarrass me in front of my friends," but actually communicated, "I have no idea what you're thinking, and that scares me." Good. She should be scared. Not that she knew it yet. "Well, we were just discussing the charity gala next month," Olivia said, her CEO voice in full effect, redirecting the conversation like a skilled politician avoiding a scandal. "Marcus won't be attending, obviously." "Obviously," I agreed, taking a bite of my sandwich. "Wouldn't want to embarrass your aesthetic vision in public." The friends exchanged glances, uncertain whether I was being serious or sarcastic. Perfect. Keep them guessing. Keep everyone guessing. The best poker players never show their hand until it's time to collect their winnings. I grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, one of those expensive mineral waters that Olivia insisted on buying because apparently regular water wasn't good enough for her hydration needs, and gave them all a little wave. "Ladies, enjoy your evening. I'll be in the suite if anyone needs me," which they won't, because I'm learning humility. I could feel their eyes on my back as I left, could practically hear the gossip that would explode the moment I was out of earshot. "Did you see how calm he was?" I think Olivia broke him. "He seems almost happy." They had no idea. None of them did. Back in the suite, I added another item to my whiteboard under completed tasks. Maintain cover. Check. The next few days followed the same pattern. I'd wake up, work on my exit strategy, pretend to be the chastised husband, and watch Olivia strut around like she'd won some kind of victory. She started staying out later, coming home after midnight smelling like expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine. She'd tiptoe past the suite like she was being sneaky, like I couldn't hear her heels clicking on the hardwood or her phone buzzing with text messages that made her giggle. Each night, I'd add another note to my evidence folder, another transaction to screenshot, another lie to document. It was almost too easy. She'd gotten so comfortable in her deception, so confident that she'd successfully sidelined me, that she'd stopped being careful. Or maybe she'd never been careful to begin with. When you think you're the smartest person in the room, you stop watching your back. I labeled more items. Blue tape became my secret language, my way of reclaiming what was mine in a house that had stopped feeling like home somewhere around year 3 of our marriage. The vintage leather chair I'd restored myself, blue tape under the seat cushion. My grandfather's old toolbox that Olivia had wanted to throw out because it was rusty and old, blue tape on the bottom. Even the coffee maker, the good one I'd bought with my own money after Olivia's fancy espresso machine broke for the 3rd time, blue tape on the base. Every marked item was a small victory, a piece of my life that I was taking back one blue strip at a time. It was quiet revenge, the kind that doesn't announce itself with shouting or door slamming, but with careful planning and patient execution. The kind that waits for exactly the right moment to strike. And that moment was coming soon. Very soon. 1 week before D-Day, I stood in the suite looking at my whiteboard, at my packed boxes hidden in the closet, at my folder full of evidence sitting on the desk, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not happiness exactly. Not even satisfaction yet. That would come later. What I felt was readiness. Pure, crystalline readiness. Like a runner at the starting line who's trained for months and knows he's about to win the race. Olivia thought she was teaching me a lesson. She thought I was in here sulking, regretting, learning to be more compliant, more agreeable, more willing to apologize for having opinions about overpriced crystal dogs and $18,000 business coaches who flexed more than they thought. What I was actually learning was how to dismantle a marriage with the same precision I used to restore furniture. Carefully, methodically, with attention to every detail and respect for the process. The house of quiet revenge was almost ready to collapse, and I was going to walk out of the rubble without a scratch. Thursday morning arrived like Christmas morning for a kid who'd been really, really good all year. I woke up at 6 a.m., not because of an alarm, but because my body apparently knew that today was the day and decided sleep was for people who weren't about to execute the most satisfying exit strategy of their lives. I made coffee in the suite using my soon-to-be liberated coffee maker, savoring every sip like it was aged whiskey instead of medium roast from Costco. Through the walls, I could hear Olivia's morning routine, the shower running, the hairdryer blasting, the clicking of her heels as she moved around the bedroom like a general preparing for battle. Except today, she had no idea the battle was already over and she'd lost. I got dressed carefully. Jeans, a comfortable shirt, nothing fancy. Today wasn't about impressing anyone. Today was about efficiency and execution. I checked my phone. Rick had sent a text at 5:30 a.m. Ready when you are. Standing by. These guys were professionals. I was starting to understand why they had 5-star reviews on Google. At 7:30, I heard Olivia's heels clicking down the stairs. She was on her phone, naturally, her voice carrying through the house in that executive tone she probably practiced in the mirror. No, tell them we need the revised numbers by noon. I don't care if it's inconvenient. That's what deadline means. I waited until I heard her car pull out of the driveway, watched through the suite's window as her black Mercedes disappeared down the street like a villain leaving the scene before the hero makes his move. Except in this story, I wasn't the hero. I was just a guy taking his stuff and his dignity and getting the hell out. At 11:30, right on schedule, I got the text from Rick. She just left. Saw her pull out. We're moving in. I responded, copy that. Go time. I wish I could say I helped with the move, but part of the plan was me not being there. I couldn't risk being seen by neighbors. Couldn't risk someone mentioning to Olivia that they'd spotted me supervising a moving truck. So instead, I went to work like it was any other Thursday, sat at my desk at the restoration shop, and pretended to focus on refinishing a Victorian-era end table while my phone buzzed with updates every 15 minutes. 11:47. Truck in position. Starting with garage. 12:15. Furniture loaded. Moving to personal items. 12:42. Bedroom clear. Office clear. Moving to final sweep. 1:18. Everything loaded. Doing final check for blue tape. 1:33. We're out. Heading to storage. Clean exit. I stared at that last message for a solid minute, letting it sink in. Clean exit. My entire life with Olivia, reduced to blue-taped items in a moving truck, heading to a climate-controlled storage unit where it would wait for my next chapter to begin. It felt surreal. It felt perfect. Now came the final act. I left work early, drove home, and prepared the closing arguments of our marriage. At exactly 6:30 p.m., while Olivia was still at her business development lunch that had inevitably turned into happy hour because these things always did, I placed 2 items on her pristine marble desk in her home office. First, my house keys. The main key, the garage key, the mailbox key, the entire set, arranged in a neat little row like soldiers standing at attention. Second, the divorce papers. All 63 pages of them, printed on premium paper stock, perfectly aligned and stapled, looking more official than any document had a right to look. Tina had outdone herself. These weren't just divorce papers. They were a masterclass in legal documentation, a greatest hits album of everything you did wrong. And on top of the papers, I placed a note. Just one line, written in my handwriting on a simple white card. Consider this an early resignation. I stood there for a moment, looking at the scene I'd created. It was beautiful in its simplicity. No drama, no shouting match, no thrown dishes or tearful confrontations. Just keys, papers, and a note that said everything that needed to be said in 6 words. Then I left. No looking back, no second thoughts, no movie moment where I dramatically walked through the house, one last time remembering the good times. There were no good times left to remember. Just expensive furniture, terrible art, and 7 years of slowly losing myself to someone who valued crystal dogs more than actual human connection. I got in my car, drove to my new temporary apartment, a modest 1-bedroom above my restoration shop that cost a quarter of what our mortgage did and felt 10 times more like home, and waited. At 7:14 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. At 7:42, it buzzed again. Olivia's number this time. Voicemail. At 8:01. Marcus, where's your stuff? 8:12, another call. Voicemail. 8:42. Marcus, is this a joke? 9:03. Marcus, answer me. 9:12. You can't just leave. We need to talk about this. 9:28. I'm calling my lawyer. I sat on my new couch. Well, old couch. I'd found it at an estate sale and restored it myself 3 years ago. One of the blue-taped items. Drinking a beer and watching my phone light up like a Christmas tree with increasingly frantic messages. Each one was more desperate than the last. The CEO voice cracking. The corporate composure shattering like that $6,000 crystal dog statue if someone had the good sense to throw it against a wall. By 9:20, she'd left 8 voicemails and sent 14 text messages, each one a journey through the stages of grief compressed into digital communication. Denial. This isn't happening. Anger. How dare you? Bargaining. We can work this out. Depression. I can't believe you're doing this. And finally, my personal favorite, acceptance. Fine. Have it your way. Except it wasn't acceptance. It was defeat. For the first time in 7 years, possibly for the first time in her entire adult life, Olivia Ford had lost control of her favorite employee, the husband she'd relegated to the guest room, the man she thought she'd successfully broken and molded into someone who'd apologize for having opinions. I took another sip of beer, deleted all her messages without listening to them, and smiled. The CEO had just received her wake-up call. And unlike her 4 a.m. yoga alarms, this one couldn't be snoozed. 3 weeks later, I found myself sitting in a conference room that looked like it had been decorated by someone who thought beige was a personality trait. Everything was neutral. Neutral walls, neutral carpet, neutral abstract art that could have been hanging upside down and nobody would notice or care. The only thing not neutral in the room was the tension, which you could have cut with a knife and served on those little appetizer plates lawyers probably kept in storage for exactly these occasions. Across the table sat Olivia, and let me tell you, she came dressed for war. Not actual war, but corporate war, which meant she looked like she was about to deliver a TED Talk titled, How to Gaslight with Confidence, in a Chanel suit. She wore a power suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, her hair pulled back in that severe bun that made her look like a librarian who'd fire you for breathing too loud. Her makeup applied with the precision of someone preparing for a photo shoot with Vogue's "Women Who Think They're Better Than You" issue. She wouldn't look at me. Not directly. She kept her eyes fixed on the documents in front of her, her perfectly manicured nails. Gel, always gel, because regular polish was apparently for peasants. Tapping against the conference table in a rhythm that suggested she was either nervous or plotting my murder. Possibly both. Next to her sat her lawyer, a guy named Bradley Whitmore III, because of course his name had a numeral in it. He looked exactly like you'd imagine a guy named Bradley Whitmore III would look. Perfect hair that had probably never experienced humidity, a suit that cost more than my first car, and a smile that suggested he'd sold his soul for a corner office and excellent dental coverage. He was the kind of lawyer who bragged about his win record at cocktail parties and called judges by their first names because he golfed with them on weekends. Bradley had that smug energy radiating off him like cologne, the kind of confidence that came from winning cases not through superior legal knowledge, but through sheer financial intimidation. He was probably used to representing people like Olivia, people with money and attitude who thought they could buy their way out of the consequences of their own actions. On my side of the table sat Tina, looking like a woman who ate lawyers like Bradley for breakfast and still had room for pancakes. She wore a simple black suit, minimal jewelry, no designer labels screaming for attention. But her eyes, those eyes had seen things, new things, and were currently watching Bradley like a shark watching a particularly stupid seal swim too close to shore. "Shall we begin?" the mediator asked, a tired-looking woman named Patricia who'd probably sat through 1,000 of these meetings and stopped being surprised by human stupidity around meeting number 12. She had the energy of someone who'd seen it all, heard every excuse, witnessed every breakdown, and just wanted to get through this so she could go home and drink wine in peace. Bradley cleared his throat, straightened his tie, which was already perfectly straight, and launched into his opening statement like he was arguing before the Supreme Court instead of sitting in a beige conference room dealing with a divorce. "My client, Mrs. Ford, believes she deserves compensation for her instrumental role in Mr. Ford's business success." Not pale like she'd seen a ghost, but pale like she was the ghost, and someone had just turned on all the lights. "Mr. Price," Tina continued, pulling out her phone and turning it to show Bradley, "is a self-described business coach whose LinkedIn profile lists his qualifications as life experience, and whose Instagram is primarily gym selfies and motivational quotes stolen from actual successful people. Fascinating consultant choice." Bradley flipped through more pages, his confidence evaporating like water on a hot skillet. There were the bank statements showing Olivia's spending patterns, the credit card bills with charges at hotels on nights she'd claimed to be working late, the text messages, that Tina had legally obtained through Discovery, messages between Olivia and Leon that were less about business optimization and more about, well, let's just say the only thing being optimized was their ability to be terrible people. "Page 15, Tina said helpfully, "shows a particularly interesting exchange where Mrs. Ford instructs Mr. Price to delete this, babe." Unfortunately for Mrs. Ford, Mr. Price apparently doesn't understand how phone backups work. Technology is tricky that way. The silence in that room was absolutely delicious. It tasted better than the most expensive meal Olivia had ever charged to our joint account. It felt better than sleeping diagonally in the suite. It was the sound of karma showing up late, but making a spectacular entrance. Bradley cleared his throat, flipped through a few more pages, then whispered something to Olivia. She shook her head violently, her composure cracking like cheap porcelain. She whispered back, her voice rising just enough that we could all hear her say, "This is ridiculous. That's not what it looks like." "Mrs. Ford," Patricia the mediator said, her tired voice carrying a note of warning, "perhaps you'd like to take a moment to consult with your attorney privately?" "I don't need a moment," Olivia snapped, her CEO voice breaking through. "This is, Marcus, you can't actually believe. We can work this out. This is all a misunderstanding." I looked at her, really looked at her. At this woman I'd married 7 years ago, who'd somehow convinced herself that she was the victim in a story where she was clearly the villain. At this person who'd relegated me to a guest room, spent our money on a glorified Instagram model with a motivational quote addiction, and now sat across from me, trying to gaslight her way out of documented evidence. "Olivia," I said quietly, speaking for the first time since we'd entered the conference room. "The only misunderstanding is the one where you thought I was stupid enough not to notice." Her mouth opened, closed, opened again like a fish trying to breathe air. No words came out. The CEO had no prepared statement for this scenario. Tina slid another document across the table. "Given the evidence of marital misconduct and misuse of joint funds, we're prepared to offer the following settlement. Mrs. Ford receives temporary alimony of $2,000 per month for 18 months, allowing her time to, as she likes to say, optimize her career opportunities. She keeps her personal vehicle, her personal bank account, and any assets she can prove she purchased with documented separate funds. Mr. Ford retains full ownership of his business, the marital home, and all items he can demonstrate were his separate property prior to or during the marriage." $2,000 a month? Bradley sputtered, finally finding his voice. "That's less than her monthly manicure budget." Tina finished. "Yes, perhaps Mrs. Ford should have considered that before spending $18,000 on a business coach who specializes in bicep curls and motivational plagiarism." Even Patricia, the mediator, had to hide a smile at that one. The meeting lasted another 2 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. By the end of it, Olivia sat slumped in her chair, her perfect posture finally defeated, while Bradley tried desperately to negotiate better terms and failed spectacularly. The evidence was too solid, the case too clear, the karma too perfectly served. As we filed out of the conference room, Patricia pulled me aside. "Mr. Ford," she said, her tired eyes showing something that might have been respect. "In 20 years of doing this job, I've never seen someone so thoroughly prepared." "Well done." "Thank you," I replied. "I had a lot of time to plan. Guest room exile is very productive." She actually laughed at that, a real laugh that suggested she'd needed something funny in her day. Outside the building, Tina turned to me, her professional demeanor cracking into a genuine smile. "Marcus, that was beautiful. Did you see her face when we brought up the text messages?" "I did," I said, feeling lighter than I had in years. "I really did." "Drinks are on me," Tina announced. "You just won the Divorce Olympics, and I want to celebrate the gold medal." As we walked away, I glanced back one last time to see Olivia standing by her Mercedes, phone pressed to her ear, probably calling Leon to explain why their gravy train had just derailed. Even from a distance, I could see the defeat in her posture, the reality finally settling in that this wasn't a negotiation she could win through force of personality or designer suits. The boardroom divorce was over, and for once, the CEO had lost. Freedom looked good on me, not in some metaphorical, abstract way that people talk about when they're trying to sound deep on social media. I mean literally, physically, tangibly good. I'd lost 15 pounds without trying, mostly because I was no longer stress-eating my way through a marriage that felt like a prison sentence with expensive furniture. I'd wake up on Saturday mornings and make pancakes without someone telling me that carbs were inflammatory and I should really try her latest diet trend. I'd watch whatever I wanted on TV without negotiating like I was brokering a Middle East peace treaty. I'd invite friends over, actual friends, not people I was obligated to network with, and we'd drink beer and laugh, and nobody would check their phone every 5 minutes or start talking about disrupting the industry. I even started a podcast because apparently freedom makes you do things you never thought you'd do. It was called Things My Ex Should Have Appreciated, and it was exactly what it sounded like. Me talking about life, relationships, restoration work, and all the lessons I'd learned from 7 years of marriage to a woman who thought love was a performance review. I recorded episodes in my loft, usually late at night with a beer in hand, just talking into a microphone like I was having a conversation with an old friend. The podcast started as a joke, something to amuse myself and maybe 3 people who stumbled across it by accident. But then it grew. People found it. People related to it. Apparently, the world was full of men and women who'd been in relationships where they felt like employees instead of partners, where they'd slowly lost themselves trying to meet impossible standards set by people who confused control with love. Within 3 months, I had 5,000 subscribers. By 6 months, 20,000. People would email me their stories, and I'd read them on the show, and we'd all have this collective moment of, holy shit, I'm not crazy. This actually happened to other people too. It was therapy, except cheaper and with more sarcasm. The reviews were my favorite part. Finally, someone who gets it, one person wrote. Marcus talks about divorce like a normal person instead of a self-help guru. 5 stars. Another said, this podcast saved my marriage because I realized I was turning into the person Marcus divorced. Changed my behavior immediately. And my personal favorite. I listen to this while my wife is at yoga and remember why I married someone who doesn't own a single crystal dog statue. Money started coming in from the podcast. Not a fortune, but enough to cover my bar tab and contribute to my Never Again fund, which was what I called my savings account for hiring lawyers if I ever got stupid enough to remarry. Spoiler alert, I wasn't planning on it. Life was good. Life was really, genuinely, honestly good in a way it hadn't been in years. I was living in a cramped loft above my business, working 70-hour weeks, and I'd never been happier. Turns out, the secret to happiness isn't a big house or expensive furniture or a partner who treats you like a subsidiary of their personal empire. The secret is being yourself without apologizing for it. And then came Nina. It was a Tuesday afternoon, one of those perfect fall days where the air is crisp and the light comes through the windows at just the right angle to make everything look like a painting. I was in the showroom, working on refinishing a 1920s Art Deco dresser that someone had painted over with about 17 coats of white paint, a crime against furniture that I was in the process of correcting when the bell above the door chimed. I looked up, and there she was, Nina Morales, though I didn't know her name yet. All I knew was that she had dark curly hair pulled back in a messy bun, wore paint-stained jeans and a flannel shirt like she'd actually been working instead of trying to look like she'd been working, and had the kind of smile that suggested she found the world generally amusing instead of constantly disappointing. Hi, she said, walking in and immediately gravitating toward a salvaged light fixture I'd restored the previous week, an old industrial pendant lamp from a factory that had been torn down in the 50s. Is this original glass or a reproduction? Original, I said, setting down my sandpaper and wiping my hands on my work apron. Found it at an estate sale in Pennsylvania. The woman who owned it said it hung in her grandfather's workshop for 40 years. Nina ran her fingers along the metal housing, examining it with the kind of attention that suggested she actually cared about the answer instead of just making conversation. It's beautiful. The patina is perfect. I'm working on a restaurant redesign, and I've been looking for authentic industrial lighting. Everything I find is either actually old but falling apart, or fake vintage that looks like it came from a catalog titled Brooklyn Clichés. I laughed. Actually laughed. The kind that comes from genuine amusement instead of polite obligation. You just described 90% of what people try to sell as vintage these days. Right? She turned to look at me, and her smile widened. I'm Nina, by the way. Interior designer. Specializing in spaces that don't look like Pinterest threw up on them. Marcus, I replied, extending my hand. Furniture restoration, specializing in saving things that people were about to throw away because they didn't match the aesthetic. Her handshake was firm, confident, the grip of someone who actually used their hands for work. We're going to get along great, she said. And we did. Nina became a regular at the shop, stopping by 2 or 3 times a week to check on pieces I was restoring for her projects or just to chat about design and craftsmanship and the general ridiculousness of people who thought reclaimed barn wood was a personality trait. She was smart, funny, passionate about her work in a way that reminded me why I loved what I did. She'd get genuinely excited about finding the perfect drawer pulls or discovering that a table I was working on had its original finish underneath 6 layers of questionable life choices. We started grabbing coffee together, then lunch, then drinks after work, sitting at the bar down the street from my shop, talking about everything from furniture trends to terrible movies to our respective disaster relationship stories. She'd been married, too, briefly, to a guy who turned out to be more interested in his CrossFit coach than his wife. I should have known, she said one evening, laughing at the memory instead of crying about it, which I respected. He named our dog Gaines. That's a red flag the size of Texas. My ex-wife spent $6,000 on a crystal dog statue, I countered. Oh, you win. You definitely win the bad marriage Olympics. It was easy, talking to Nina. Effortless in a way that conversation had never been with Olivia, where every discussion felt like a negotiation and every joke required a legal disclaimer. With Nina, I could just be myself, sarcastic, occasionally crude, passionate about furniture restoration in a way that most people found weird, but she found charming. One afternoon, about 2 months after we'd met, Nina came into the shop looking for antique lighting fixtures for a project. I showed her what I had, a collection of salvaged chandeliers, sconces, and pendant lamps that I'd accumulated over the years. She was examining a 1940s chandelier when I told her the story. The whole story. The guest room exile, the crystal dog statue, the business coach, with the gym selfies, the midnight move, all of it. When I got to the part about the statue, she just looked at me for a long moment, then said, "You should have kept it. It would have been perfect for the trash." I think that's when I knew. When I really knew. Not that I loved her. It was too soon for that, and I was too smart to rush into anything after what I'd just escaped. But I knew that I was healed, that I was ready, that I'd finally finished the journey from bitter divorced guy to person who could actually laugh about his past instead of being haunted by it. Nina wasn't Olivia. She didn't wear power suits or talk about synergy or treat relationships like quarterly reports. She got paint under her fingernails and laughed at terrible jokes and appreciated things for their craftsmanship instead of their Instagram potential. She was real in a way that Olivia had never been, comfortable in her own skin instead of constantly performing for an invisible audience. We started dating officially a few weeks later. Nothing dramatic or grand, just a natural progression from friends who enjoyed each other's company to people who wanted to enjoy each other's company exclusively. She'd come over to the loft, and we'd cook dinner together. Actually cook, not order takeout from restaurants that didn't list prices. We'd watch movies without checking our phones. We'd talk until 2 in the morning about everything and nothing, the kind of conversations that happen when you're with someone who actually listens instead of just waiting for their turn to talk. The best part? The absolute best part? There were no games. No power plays. No tests to see if I'd notice when she was upset about something she wouldn't tell me about. No keeping score of who did what for whom. Just two adults who liked each other, treated each other with respect, and didn't need a crystal dog statue to feel validated. Freedom looked good on me. But happiness? Happiness looked even better. A year later, I found myself standing in the grand ballroom of the Riverside Hotel, wearing a suit that actually fit me instead of hanging off my stress-eating frame, holding a glass of champagne that tasted expensive because it was, and feeling genuinely content with my life for the first time in approximately forever. The occasion was a charity auction for designer furniture. One of those events where rich people pretend to care about good causes while actually just competing to see who can spend the most money on things they don't need. Normally, I'd rather have a root canal than attend something like this, but Nina had designed the entire event space and wanted me there for moral support. Plus, some of the furniture being auctioned was pieces I'd restored, so I had a professional excuse to be there that didn't make me sound like a sap who just wanted to support his girlfriend. The ballroom was done up in that modern minimalist style that was currently trendy. Lots of white, strategic pops of color, lighting that made everything look like it belonged in an art gallery instead of a hotel that usually hosted wedding receptions and corporate conferences. Nina had outdone herself. Even I, a guy who spent most of his time covered in sawdust and would stain, could appreciate the aesthetic. It was clean without being sterile, elegant without being pretentious, the kind of design that whispered, "I'm expensive," instead of screaming it like Olivia's crystal dog statue. I was standing near one of my restored pieces, a mid-century modern credenza that I'd salvaged from an estate sale and spent 2 months bringing back to life, explaining its history to a couple who were seriously considering bidding on it when I saw her. Olivia Ford. Still immaculate, still armed with confidence like it was designer body armor, still carrying herself like she owned every room she walked into. She was wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her hair styled in that perfectly casual way that actually takes hours and a professional to achieve, her makeup so flawless it looked like she'd been airbrushed by angels. She looked exactly like the woman I'd married, which is to say she looked like $1,000,000 and about as warm as a tax audit. But there was something different. Something in the way she moved, maybe, or the set of her shoulders. She looked tired. Not physically tired. Olivia would never allow herself to look physically tired in public. But tired in a deeper way, the kind that expensive makeup and designer clothes can't quite cover up. The kind of tired that comes from maintaining a facade that's slowly crumbling. She wasn't alone. Of course, she wasn't alone. Olivia Ford didn't do anything alone if there was someone around to witness her doing it. She was standing beside an older man, probably in his late 50s, with silver hair that was definitely dyed, a tan that screamed, "I have a place in the Hamptons," and a watch that could have funded a small country's economy. He had his hand on the small of her back in that possessive way that rich men do when they've acquired something they consider valuable. I didn't recognize him, but I recognized the type: investor, venture capitalist, the kind of guy who thought money could solve any problem and create any reality he wanted. Olivia saw me at the exact same moment I saw her. I watched her freeze, her CEO composure cracking just slightly, like ice forming hairline fractures before it shatters completely. Her eyes went wide for just a fraction of a second before she regained control, but I'd seen it. The surprise, the discomfort, the flash of something that might have been regret or might have been indigestion from the overpriced hors d'oeuvres. I was with Nina, who looked absolutely stunning in a simple black dress that cost probably a tenth of what Olivia's cost, and looked 10 times better because Nina wore clothes instead of letting clothes wear her. We'd been laughing about something. I can't even remember what. Probably one of Nina's stories about a client who wanted to put a hot tub in their dining room. And the contrast couldn't have been more obvious. I was happy. Genuinely, visibly, radiantly happy in a way that had nothing to do with what I owned or who I was standing next to, and everything to do with the fact that I was finally living a life that felt like mine. The older investor guy leaned down to whisper something to Olivia, probably asking who I was, why she looked like she'd just seen a ghost wearing a really nice suit. I saw her shake her head slightly, say something back that I couldn't hear but could imagine. Nobody important, maybe, or just someone I used to know. She was good at minimizing people who made her uncomfortable. It was one of her signature moves, right up there with "let's circle back to that" and "I'm not angry, I'm disappointed." For a moment, we just stood there, Olivia and I, on opposite sides of the ballroom that Nina had transformed into something beautiful, staring at each other across a divide that was much bigger than the physical space between us. It was like looking at a version of my life that I'd escaped from, a parallel universe where I was still sleeping in guest rooms and apologizing for having opinions about overpriced home decor. Nina noticed my distraction and followed my gaze. "Is that her?" she asked quietly, her voice curious but not threatened. She knew the whole story. I told her everything over the course of our relationship, all the details I'd shared on my podcast, and then some. She'd listened without judgment, laughed at the ridiculous parts, and told me I was better off, which I knew but appreciated hearing anyway. "That's her," I confirmed. "Huh," Nina said, studying Olivia with the analytical eye of a designer evaluating a space. "She looks exhausting." I laughed. I couldn't help it. That's the perfect word for it. Exhausting. "You want to leave? We can leave." "Nah," I said, taking a sip of my champagne. "I'm good. Besides, you worked too hard on this event for me to bail because my ex showed up." Nina squeezed my hand, a simple gesture of solidarity that felt better than any grand romantic declaration. That was the thing about Nina. She didn't need to make big gestures or dramatic statements. She just showed up, supported, existed beside me in a way that felt easy instead of like work. The auction started, and I let myself get absorbed in it, watching people bid ridiculous amounts of money on furniture that was beautiful, but ultimately just furniture. My credenza went for $8,000 to a tech CEO who probably wanted it for his vacation home. I felt a surge of pride, not because of the money, but because something I'd created with my own hands was valued that highly. Olivia would have said something dismissive about it, probably called it cute, in that tone that meant beneath me. Nina just grinned and whispered, "You're basically famous now. I'm dating a furniture celebrity." About halfway through the auction, during a break where people were mingling and pretending to care about the charity while actually networking, I felt eyes on me. I turned, and there she was. Olivia, walking toward me. Actually walking toward me. Her investor boyfriend temporarily abandoned at the bar, where he was probably discussing market trends with other people who thought personality was something you could buy. My first instinct was to walk away, to avoid the confrontation or awkward conversation or whatever this was about to be. But then I realized something. I didn't want to walk away. Not because I wanted to talk to Olivia, but because I didn't need to run from her anymore. She had no power over me, no ability to make me feel small or inadequate or like I was somehow failing at being a person. She was just a woman in an expensive dress who'd made some bad choices and had to live with the consequences. So I stood my ground. Nina, bless her, sensed this was something I needed to do alone and excused herself to check on the catering, but not before giving my hand one more squeeze that said, "I'm here if you need me." Olivia stopped a few feet away, maintaining that corporate distance that probably felt safer than getting too close. Up close, I could see the cracks in her armor more clearly, the fine lines around her eyes that her makeup couldn't quite hide, the tension in her jaw, the slight tremor in her hand as she adjusted her clutch purse. "Marcus," she said, my name sounding strange in her mouth, like a word in a foreign language she used to speak fluently but had forgotten. "Olivia," I replied, keeping my voice neutral, polite, the tone you'd use with a stranger at a networking event. "You look." She paused, searching for the right word. "Good." "Happy." "I am," I said simply, because there was no point in false modesty or pretending otherwise. "You." She laughed, but it wasn't her real laugh. Not that I'd heard her real laugh in years. It was her corporate laugh, the one she used when clients made bad jokes or investors said something she disagreed with but couldn't contradict. "I'm doing well. Richard." She gestured vaguely toward the bar where her investor boyfriend was holding court. "He's been very supportive during my career transition." "Career transition," I repeated, and I couldn't quite keep the amusement out of my voice. Even now, even after everything, Olivia couldn't just say she'd changed jobs or lost a client or whatever actually happened. It had to be a transition, like she was a butterfly emerging from a chrysalis instead of a person dealing with the consequences of her choices. "The marketing firm and I parted ways," she said, and I could hear the careful corporate speak, the sanitized version of whatever messy reality had occurred. It was time for a change. "I'm consulting now. Independent work. More flexibility." Translation: she got fired, probably because sleeping with your business coach and billing his $18,000 fee to company expenses tends to make HR departments very uncomfortable. But I didn't say that. I just nodded. "And the house?" I asked, genuinely curious despite myself. "Sold. 3 months ago. The market was favorable." Her voice was tight, controlled, every word carefully measured like she was giving a presentation to shareholders. "Good," I said, and I meant it. "I hope you got what you needed from it." There was a pause, heavy with all the things we weren't saying, all the history that hung between us like furniture in a room we no longer lived in. I could see her struggling with something, wrestling with words that wanted to come out, but were fighting against 7 years of conditioning that said showing vulnerability was weakness. "I saw your podcast," she finally said, and there it was, the real reason she'd walked over. "Things my ex should have appreciated." "Ah," I said, because what else was there to say? "So you know I talk about the crystal dog statue pretty regularly." "Among other things," she said, and for just a second, I saw something real flash across her face. Shame, maybe, or regret, or just the uncomfortable realization that she'd become a cautionary tale in someone else's story of redemption. "It's not mean-spirited," I said, and it was true. The podcast had started as therapy but evolved into something else. Honest reflection on patterns, mistakes, lessons learned. "It's just honest." "I know," she said quietly. "That's what makes it worse." I didn't know what to say to that. Sorry felt wrong. I wasn't sorry for telling my truth. But gloating felt equally wrong. I'd moved past anger a long time ago, somewhere between the divorce settlement and my first date with Nina. "I made mistakes," Olivia continued, the words coming out like they were being extracted with pliers. "With us. With everything. I thought I knew what I wanted, what mattered. I thought success looked like." She gestured around the ballroom, at the expensive furniture and the rich people and the whole glittering facade of it all. "This. And now?" I asked, genuinely curious. She looked at her investor boyfriend at the bar, then back at me. "Now I'm not sure. Richard he's successful. Stable. He gives me access to opportunities one wouldn't have otherwise." "But," I prompted, because there was definitely a but hanging in the air. "But he's not." She trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish the sentence. I didn't finish it for her. I didn't need to. We both knew what she wasn't saying, that Richard, for all his money and connections and stability, probably made her feel the same way she'd made me feel. Like an employee, like a portfolio asset, like something to be managed and optimized rather than loved. I should go, she said, straightening her shoulders, rebuilding the walls that had briefly showed cracks. It was good to see you, Marcus. I mean that. You too, I said, and surprisingly, I meant it too. Not because I missed her or wanted her back or harbored any illusions about what we'd been, but because seeing her helped me realize how far I'd come, how much I'd grown, how completely I'd rebuilt my life into something that actually felt like living instead of just existing. She turned to leave, then paused. That woman you're with, Nina, she seems lovely. She is, I said simply. Good, Olivia said, and I think she actually meant it. You deserve that. She walked away then, her heels clicking on the polished floor, returning to Richard and his money and whatever version of happiness she'd convinced herself she'd found. I watched her go, feeling nothing but a distant sort of pity and a profound sense of gratitude that I wasn't her anymore, that I'd escaped, that I'd chosen differently. Nina reappeared at my side, materializing like she'd been waiting just out of sight for the conversation to end. You okay? She asked. Yeah, I said, and I realized it was completely true. I'm really okay. Good, she said, linking her arm through mine. Because I think we should bid on that ridiculous Art Deco lamp. It would look perfect in your loft. I laughed, genuinely laughed, and raised my glass slightly in the direction Olivia had gone. A silent toast she'd never see and wouldn't understand if she did. A toast to the end of something that should have ended years ago. A toast to freedom, to second chances, to lives rebuilt from the pieces we choose to save instead of the ones we're told we should keep. Market correction, huh? Nina asked, having overheard the earlier exchange somehow, because she was perceptive like that. I smiled. Yeah, best correction I ever made. The funny thing is, Olivia had been right all along. The guest room did teach me humility, just not in the way she'd expected, not in the way she'd planned when she sent me there like a child being punished for speaking truth to power. Because that's where I learned to finally say goodbye, not with anger or bitterness or resentment, but with style, with sarcasm, and with perfectly signed paperwork that freed me from a life that looked successful from the outside, but felt like dying slowly from the inside. The guest room taught me that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the best thing in disguise. That being sent away can actually be the universe giving you permission to leave. That punishment can transform into liberation if you're willing to see it that way. And most importantly, it taught me that the only person's approval I ever really needed was my own. I stood there in Nina's beautiful ballroom, surrounded by furniture I'd restored and people I didn't know, holding champagne I didn't need, feeling happiness I'd earned, and I thought, yeah, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. Not in a mansion with crystal dog statues and marble floors. Not sleeping in guest rooms, learning lessons from someone who confused control with love. Not apologizing for having opinions or personality or the audacity to think I deserve better. Just here, in my own life. With someone who laughed at my jokes and appreciated my work and didn't need me to be anything other than exactly who I was. Freedom looked good on me. But the view from the other side of that guest room door? That looked even better.